Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer, and today we're doing a book review for Avalon TimeFall. Now, this was a book that was sent to me to my P.O. box about a year ago, maybe sometime last year. That's all that I know. And it's been on my bookshelf back there for a while now, and I am very sorry that it took me this long to read it, but I am also sorry for what is about to happen to all of us. But before we get into the book review or the book discussion of this overall book, I thought it was going to be a much shorter book, and I read this during my time before going to the wedding and then finished it after the wedding, and well, we're in for it. But before we get started, number one, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. The number one way to be featured is through Lemoy, the monthly prompt writing contest, where I give you a prompt. You write a short story using the prompt, and on the first Monday of the month, we bask in your creativity. The second way to be featured is if you are an indie author and you have a book out or a book that is coming out. If you submit the first chapter and the cover to the Fresh Meat feature, it'll be read here on the channel to hopefully help more readers find your work. I pick books out of there when I find one that tickles my pickle, and hopefully other readers will too. It's a way for me to share books that may not be my taste, but shouldn't be dictated if they get shared based on whether I like them or not. So that's my attempt to be as fair as possible. The third thing is, if you would like to check out any of my books, they're available at any of your favorite places to get books, including the local library upon request. My next book, Body More Zero, is coming out in October, and it features these fine gentlemen to my left. Yeah. And maybe you've just noticed, but ain't Casey looking pretty dang fly? That's because Monty drew a new picture of him, and he is a babe. Okay? He got that frontman energy, absolutely. There is a reason. There's a part in Body More Zero when Ralph is going through Casey's emails and he sees one that's titled, "Wanna elope? My dad'll hate you." Casey's emails be a place to be, okay? Read those and more as soon as the book comes out. With that said, let's jump into the story. That's all I gotta say. So I don't really have anything to preface this with. Looking forward to your thoughts as we go. This is Avalon TimeFall by Jensen. And it's described itself as being Outlander-ish, so there is time travel. With that said, it opens with a prologue, and a 12-year-old girl named Caitlin is with her family on a yacht talking about retirement. Her parents want to go and get their own boats to enjoy retirement when it's their time, and no one wants to talk to Caitlin. She just keeps getting shoved off. She gets pushed off by her brother, pushed off by her sister, so she goes upstairs and is hanging out with the captain when disaster strikes and the yacht shakes, and she eventually falls off of the yacht and it disappears. And then we switch to the Coast Guard's POV, where he goes out after a distress call and then says that he wrote a report but left stuff out because people wouldn't believe him anyway, which kind of just made the Coast Guard's POV totally stupid, since it didn't add anything, and it just said, I did things involved, but I'm not even going to describe how I was involved. Then we switch over to chapter 1, which I don't know where I say it in my notes somewhere, but Julie's setup is entirely unnecessary. In fact, I think we could have not even had Julie's perspective and just had the other main character be introduced, and then he meets Julie when they time travel, but we'll get into it. So Julie is at a family gathering for their usual Christmas traditions, which include telling silly stories that have to do with Christmas. It's Hallmark style stuff, like somebody being Santa for poor kids in Ireland, and squirrels eating a bunch of candy canes. Aiden, who is Julie's boyfriend or husband at this point, I don't remember. There are a couple. He's a husband at a later point, but there's some weird time movement in this that doesn't really make sense. He's been practicing singing so that he can be prepared for the Christmas recital that he's going to be a part of, because that's also part of family tradition. So Julie listens to him, and he doesn't sound very good. He's kind of flat, but then they go and they do the recital, and he sounds amazing. And she calls him her guardian angel, who came just in time to save her. Knight in shining armor. Sorry, not guardian angel. Knight in shining armor. We just like fluffing this dude up to let him go. Just you wait until you see how Aiden is treated later. Freaking A. So Julie also, while she will go to the recital, she doesn't want to go to Christmas Mass because she is mad at God. since her sister died in a freak cramping accident, I should say. She goes to the graveyard instead to mourn her sister while everybody else goes to Christmas Mass. Now, as she is standing over her sister's grave, she just starts crying and thinking about the accident which happened when they went to the lake. She challenged her sister to a swimming contest that they normally do, and if she wins the swimming contest, then the sister has to make her breakfast in bed for a week. And so they're swimming out to this buoy, and not only do we learn that Julie has an IQ of 269, which makes her number 2 smartest person on record. Number 1 is named a dragon, and he has a 400 IQ, which this did not know because it says that she's the smartest person. She's the second smartest by 1 point. Second smartest on record is 269. It's 268. But she has a 269 IQ. She's 15 years old. She's getting 3 doctorate degrees at 15 years old, which is also, the smartest guy in the world, a dragon, got his first degree when he was 11. Doctorate degrees take practical time to get. Like, you have to go and work in the field in order to get those degrees, and you have to defend your thesis. And it doesn't just happen because you can do the work. Like, you have to do the time. But whatever. She says she's getting 3 doctorates in 2 more years. And we will find out. I thought when I initially read this that it was being sarcastic, but it was not. Julie is actually described as Einstein in a supermodel's body. Julie gets upset that Jessica's planning to go to university on the other side of the country, and Jessica says it's because she needs space from the family. Julie is disappointed, but understands, as Jessica is described as, quote, someone who didn't like being tied down. They challenge each other to a race to the buoy, and Jessica gets a leg cramp, sinks to the bottom of the lake, and drowns somehow before Jessica or the lifeguard can even get there. This lake is not that big, and it takes like 8 to 10 minutes to drown like that, doesn't it? To where you are unable to be resuscitated, and literally nobody anywhere, even when there's a lifeguard on duty, nobody saw her falling down. This isn't even their first race, so it was weird, and it was pretty emotionless, but we'll get the vibe that pretty much all of this book is very emotionless. Quote, Julie froze for what seemed to be a lifetime. She didn't know what to do. Then Jessica emerged from the water, arms flailing. Julie! Jessica yelled. I'm cramping, help! With that last call, Jessica went under again. Jessica! Julie screamed. Her body was already in motion, making its way toward Jessica. She was 50 feet away and closing in fast. Jessica had been under for a while before Julie had begun to dive. Each time she dove into the murky depths, she came up empty-handed. Her desperation grew. Minutes felt like hours. When she began to lose hope, her hand touched flesh. Her fingers wrapped around Jessica's ankle. Julie began kicking hard toward the surface. They were met by the lifeguard, who drew Jessica back to the shore and onto the dry land. She yelled for space and began CPR. Julie had no choice but to watch from the sidelines. Julie then also watches the paramedics try and prays, because that's all she knows how to do in this situation. Remembering the moment the lifeguard gave up on Jessica, Jules drops to her knees in real life, no longer in the memory, sobbing when an old man in a robe walks up to her to see if she is okay. She says yes, and then he walks away. She thinks about how she is to blame for the death because the lake was her idea, and she should have done more. I still don't understand how she drowned so fast. Like I said, it should take longer, and the lifeguard should have done something, especially seeing the flailing, the yelling. There's just no way. Then she talks to the grave about how well she's doing, Aiden being her angel, what she's studying with her 269 IQ, what she's studying with her 269 IQ. It's kind of incredible that she's not only prettier than everybody, but she's also a better swimmer than her older sister and better than everybody. She's also good at singing. She is also monetarily well off. So there's really nothing short for this person to have. It feels like front loading just the perfect life. And this makes it so rough. Like, not just the perfect life, but she is the perfect person. And you could do that without it being sussy and like use it for the story, but it's not used for the story. In fact, Julie never comes off as a smart person in any of this. She is hysterical most of the time. And you'd think somebody with an IQ that large might also struggle socially, might, have special interests of some kind because of the processing. No, the IQ does nothing. It actually feels fake most of the time, if not all the time. But since everything is just there and it's part of what usually adds to this feeling of shallow, but everything is just there for Julie, and it's part of what adds to this feeling of shallow emotion in the story. She finishes her prayer and then leaves. She skips to her job, which seems to be a TV channel talking about finances and investment. Then when she gets off, she talks to her coworker Rachel and says that Aiden is going to be in town, so she's going to take some time off because she hasn't seen him in a long time, and they're having difficulty, matching up with each other so that they can be intimate because he's also busy with his work, so they're taking a long weekend. Then over the weekend, she meets with Aiden, who sets her up with a dress and then takes her to the gala and takes her to where they had a first date or where he proposed, something like that. They return home. He says that he's going to cut back on work so he can be with her more, and they agree that they should start bringing children into this world. At this point, I was like, it absolutely doesn't feel like something bad is about to happen. It's just set up the perfect life. So clearly something bad is going to hit Aiden, like a car or a helicopter, or the FBI are going to execute him the second he steps out of the hotel. No, the worst thing to happen to him is Julie, honestly. So we're going to find none of this setup really freaking matters at all. After we get through that, we switch over to the second main POV of this book, who feels like a self-insert, and that would be Michael. He is 6'4", 350-pound high school dropout with a completely photographic memory that is so magical. He reads something once and never forgets it. He reads a translated word once and then just knows the language. He told his nickname was Black Velvet, and if that's a reference to the song talking about the enigmatic figure of Elvis Presley, then it's hard to believe that he is so socially dejected when he had the nickname Black Velvet, because he talks about how nobody in high school or in middle school wanted to be friends with him. He is so lonely. Everybody hates him. He's such a fatty. He's such an ugly fatty McFat. That's going to be repeated a number of times, that he doesn't think he deserves a girlfriend because he is so fat. But then how did he get the name Black Velvet? I guess unless they're making fun of him. His roommate or friend is a neurosurgeon in training and is asking him to come to a party to meet some girls. Michael has no confidence about meeting girls, so he's going to go to his family's house tonight instead. He talks about how he had no childhood because he was too shy to make friends. I don't think that counts as not having a childhood. Maybe you didn't get the memories that you imagined people would have if you were having a typical childhood, like what you imagined a stereotypical childhood to be. But I hear people talk all of the time about these fantasies of what they think experiences should be that they should have because of whatever characteristic. And being shy just doesn't mean that you didn't get a proper childhood. It just means that you had a shy childhood and made choices that way. Having a bunch of friends doesn't necessarily count as having a childhood, just like having no friends doesn't necessitate not having a childhood. He dropped out of school because he was unmotivated and understimulated. Also, he was afraid of trying because he didn't want to fail and see that his intelligence wasn't real, or that it didn't matter in the end. He doesn't have any hope that he'll ever have a family because he's 350 pounds, so the closest he'll get is being an uncle. That he doesn't think any women will pick him up, but it's like, you're 6'4", you're not that fat. I'm sorry, but I don't see it. His family is made up of Mormons, though he isn't one. He leaves his family at 3 a.m. and his buddies texting him that the party was crazy. Some chick got mad drunk and passed out on the couch. Another drunk guy said that he wasn't drunk and then crashed into a table. Crazy stuff, bro. And so now he's going home with a girl. Later, don't open the door if there's a sock on it. Business. The next day, Mike is talking to his coworker Rick about how he's going to take a break in Florida. By the way, he works for the post office. He talks about how he grew up in poverty and he was watching a documentary about the top 10 most famous lost treasures, one of which was the treasure of Avalon. This leads Michael into thinking about how his family may be descended from King Arthur, so said his grandmother, though no one believed her and everybody told him to stop thinking about that, stop listening to your grandma. She is insane. You know how insane it would be to track down treasure that belonged to King Arthur, so just leave it alone. Michael never pursued, but his interest was piqued again from the documentary. I think it would have been better to make him obsess and hyperfixate. Could have even gotten into college specifically for history to then go and study which by study I mean read a book once and then know everything and then compare everything and just obsessively talk about the treasure of Avalon, instead of having him be a dropout with this random thing coming up out of nowhere. Again, it doesn't feel like there was really any thought put into the setup of this that would then build into where it was going. And I don't know why it just made Michael this absolute loser when we're going to find out that he's got basically OP superpowers as much as you can. I mean, like, he is in freaking 1692 and he's making penicillin and morphine. Meanwhile, he can also do what he calls a total recall of memories, and during his lunch break, he sits in the car and thinks about this one time with his grandpa, which was just asking his grandpa about the Lords of Avalon. Dude says that his dad told grandpa that they were related to the Lords of Avalon, but they killed the rumor to stop people from going on a treasure hunt. He's sitting in his mail truck looking at the ring that his mother gave him that has Latin on it when some random woman in a cloak walks by saying something in Latin, and he's thinking of how he's going to go and check on the Bermuda Triangle for that treasure and hope that no one's gotten there yet. But he won't be surprised if there's nothing there, because he's so unlucky that everything he tries fails. So you're going to find that as a common thing with Michael. He's just like, he succeeds at everything, just not immediately. And he's like, I'm such a failure all the time. He thinks about how special he is to remember everything and that there was only one person like him that he can think of. He says that he's a genius. He's just like Da Vinci. And then he goes into a memory of him literally being born to prove that he has memories unlike anybody else. Michael believes he and Da Vinci share the same mind because they both have high IQs. He thinks that something has obviously been wrong with him since the first day of kindergarten when he got made fun of for being fat and he sat alone. They should have made fun of him for being a freaking social weirdo, because clearly. It sounds like he's just stopped trying from the very beginning, and it makes me wonder more why he never threw himself into his studies. If no one likes you, then let your thing be things, not people, instead of dropping out and dragging yourself forever. The bullying was enough to make him feel like a bad person, and he never wanted to try ever again. He says people are jealous of his abilities to remember things, but he's like, you wouldn't want to know that it really actually sucks, because while I can remember everything, all of the bad things repeat in my head forever, and I think that I'm a bad person, and I can't get rid of it. He says that he threw himself into his studies, but then why did he drop out of school? He seems like he is consuming information without understanding it. Then it also decides that Michael wanted to do music and always had melodies inside of him. Interesting that it was finally saying this in the book after how long? He learned the piano, guitar, and violin. A new memory is unlocked. He says that his family never had any money for his birthdays because Christmas was right around the corner. So he had to make up his own treats, like staying home whenever he wanted, starting in kindergarten. Michael actually built his own little tiny house, earned all of the scout badges in 2 years, but then 81 of them couldn't be presented to him because the records were lost. I have it on good records from somebody involved in the scouts that it would be impossible for him to be a McFatty Fat and get all of those, because there's stuff like rowing and the 50K and like physically draining things that are going to make you fit in order to accomplish them. So it's just gonna load up Michael with literally everything that he could ever want, that it feels like he is putting in cheat codes all the time. You'll see. Let me know what you think as we go. Despite being very advanced at math, he was told none of it counted since it wasn't done in elementary school. I guess there was no advanced placements allowed here, just ignoring his achievements and telling him to go back, even though that's not how it really works. You can skip ahead of things if you just freaking do the tests that say, hey, yeah, you're good. I should know. I took the ACT to skip out of taking certain college courses because I already had the information. I didn't have to take them. Because he's understimulated, Michael starts skipping classes. His mom finds out, takes him to the college exams where he gets a 99%, considered the highest grade that you can possibly get. But since he can't pay the fees, he can't go to college. You know, when you're as smart as Michael is, when you're as prodigal, that's a word, as Michael is, they are going to freaking throw scholarships at you. They want that as their alumni, bro. But no, in this, nobody helps him. They just, well, if you can't pay the $8,000. And so on top of that, his grandma got sick, and so he stopped going to school, stopped doing anything to try to cure her cancer, and he feels like he almost got there, but then he failed to cure the cancer. So that's when he decided he needed to kill himself at 13, because he failed to cure cancer. And then a ghost or an angel of that dead woman showed up to him and said, No, Michael, please don't kill yourself. I love you too much. And so Michael walked it back. Then later, he keeps thinking about this person, and that's what keeps him going even when he wants to quit. So now he is going to board a plane to Bermuda, and he is going to find that Avalon treasure. Again, I think it should have just loaded him up with getting a PhD in freaking King Arthur, and so then he could have all of this King Arthur facts, Bermuda facts, all of this just obsessive, and he got no other interests. To go along with Michael's bad luck, he tries to board to Orlando, but the airline keeps failing him. Also sends his luggage to Seattle. He gets 7 canceled or delayed or full flights and moved. I don't understand the point of any of this being made difficult because it's all solved within a paragraph. It doesn't really add anything, especially when he is so gifted in everything else. This doesn't count as a hardship, especially when it's immediately fixed and it doesn't actually put any change or weight on his situation. We've got no characterization for this guy, but he's good at everything and just gives up, and lots of bad things just randomly happen to him. Though the flights do eventually work out, and he gets a seat from first class next to the most beautiful woman he's ever seen. Repeat that she is beautiful because, my gosh, she is beautiful. She could be described as Einstein in a supermodel's body. You're right. It's Julie. She's worried that he'll want to talk to her, and he does, drones on about Avalon treasure until he falls asleep and they part ways. Michael gets to accommodations and then eats at a fancy restaurant with this girl from the prologue. This is the only time the prologue actually comes in, and she's like, oh my gosh, how do you know me? He brings up the disappearance of her family in that incident, calls it the typical Bermuda Triangle story, and she tells him what happened. He listens, and she's grateful that he lended his ear to her because she's had nobody to talk to all of this time about what happened to her family when she was 12. Julie is then at her hotel thinking about the treasure of Avalon now because Michael had been talking about it on the plane. That was enough to make Julie obsess about it to the point that she's not talking to anyone for the rest of the day. Enter some exposition dumping about the Avalon and King Arthur. After finding out how much money might be there, she calls a charter to the Bermuda Triangle. I know that she's like the most beautiful girl he's ever seen, but maybe Michael shouldn't have said anything to her considering how paranoid he already is about somebody racing to get to the treasure before him. She bathes, then calls her husband, and then goes to sleep. And I'm wondering what happened during the baby making that happened in chapter 1, because now all of a sudden the baby making does not exist. And you will find as we go into the rest of this, no baby making is ever mentioned ever again. So like, why was chapter 1? Again, like I said, it could have just started with Michael doing his thing. We didn't need Julie's perspective, period. She's so unimportant, except for humiliation. Michael and Julie both wake up in the middle of a snowy forest. You didn't miss anything. That's just what it did. Immediately, Michael is like, it can't be aliens. It must be time travel. How? Why? Why do you think this? Why is that your jump? Why are we here? There is no sense to this, and he's not being built up to be the person who believes that time travel is a thing that you can just do. It's such a weird jump to make. Like, imagine that you wake up and you're somewhere that you don't remember falling asleep. What would your first thought be? Probably that it's a dream. Then, did you sleepwalk, right? Maybe. I mean, there's no way to get from Orlando to a snowy field in a sleepwalk, but still. There's also, it makes no sense to go from Orlando to freaking Salem in a time travel. Would you not just time travel in the same location? Look, I understand that eventually later it's going to say that when you are time traveling, it draws you to a historical event or whatever. So that's probably why they got drawn to Salem. Are you telling me that there were no historical events happening at any other time anywhere else on Earth at that time? Or like, why Salem? Why 1692 specifically? How did the year get chosen? Because they're going to find that they can't jump forward as much time as they've jumped back either. Julie wanders around in whatever direction because she needs to get out of the icy woods before she's freezing since she's only in her nightgown. Meanwhile, Michael is thinking about how the Bermuda Triangle is a vortex, a gateway through time. How did they even get here? They weren't even going to the Bermuda Triangle yet. They were still in Cape Canaveral. Michael is trying to work out how he got here using Occam's razor, and he's like, either someone without footprints dragged and dropped me here, or Bermuda Triangle sucked me in. How is that Occam's razor? Michael! He could have done his obsessive high IQ thoughts that would guide in this direction, but it also didn't do that. And also, why did the Bermuda Triangle not suck in anybody else? Julie wanders into a village where a dude with a gun comes out. He's got 17th century clothing on, and she begs for help. All they can think is that she is a blaspheming devil woman. They wrap her in a blanket and carry her off. Get ready because Julie is about to have a not good time. While Michael plays IRL Minecraft. Julie is taken to a dungeon where she assumes that she's been captured by some cult reenacting the Salem witch trials since they accuse her of being a witch. She says that the feds will come and get them because her husband will call them. This whole thing needed more setup in order to create some sort of believability for the time travel. I'm not saying explain it all. You can sort of just do sliders, but then you have to explain the sliding. Also, I thought the super genius of this person might have come into this, but obviously she is just not at all smart. So I continuously questioned what the purpose of her being a super genius even was. Julie is eventually taken out of the dungeon to go to trial, and she yells at them that they should all do just like Jonestown and drink the Kool-Aid and die. Then she realizes that maybe that wouldn't help her if she just starts spazzing out on them. For someone with 3 PhDs and a TV persona, she's really not that smart. She's not a very good presenter, and she's not as cool-headed as she probably should be. At trial, they accuse her of preying on their children and husbands. She's taken to trial after 3 weeks and is stripped and examined in front of the courtroom for any witch marks. Also, she's pricked a bunch of times to prove that she's a demon woman. Then she's thrown back in jail after there's been enough evidence to prove her witchery. She's pretty sure that she is going to die here. Switch over to Michael sneaking around, thinking that it must be time travel, but he needs hard proof and he also needs a way to blend in. He tries getting into a house, immediately recognizes the locks and how to open them, but also goes, man, I should call a locksmith and use an English accent to fit in more. He breaks into the house and steals clothing that fits since everything in that time period was made oversized and fit with a belt. Michael says that he feels bad taking from someone else's home that has so little and he'll compensate them later when he can. Outside, he hears people saying thee and thine. And then in another house, he finds a letter with dates that proves to him that time travel has happened and he is around Salem witch trials. Also, enter a flashback of him reading books about basket weaving and clothing making in 1692 from when he was a kid. How'd he both grow up in absolute poverty and also have all of these books on old parchment because his mother has a letter from the 1600s as well? Dad says that he's going to be so bored in kindergarten as he's going to read all of these encyclopedias for fun before he even starts kindergarten. Michael hides under the table when he hears the family come back, and he waits for the family to go to bed before he steals a bunch of food and valuables. He says that he feels bad stealing, but didn't really slow him down that much. Michael's heading out to Boston. For what reason? Who knows? We don't know if he's going to try to get a home or just live here and accept it. We don't really have any sort of motive for him. He's just kind of here. He's not even like, how did I get here? How do I get home? What am I going to do? I am so cold. He's just like, yeah. We're hit with more flashbacks, and in this we learn that Michael is basically cold resistant so much that he outdoes Norwegians, and people think that he's from Alaska or the North Pole. I told you, just anything that you can think of, load up on freaking Michael because he has everything. Dude apparently is like, since I withstood -8 for 3 hours, I can do 20 degrees indefinitely for sure. Look, as somebody who lived in below zero weather, below zero hurts your skin. It gets through your clothing. It like pricks you through your clothing, and your body still reacts to freezing temperatures, even if you don't feel it. Even if you acclimate to the feeling of the cold so it doesn't feel cold. That's one of the things that makes hypothermia so dangerous, because you hit in a certain period of hypothermia where you don't feel cold anymore. All this does is just take away any risk of this character. It takes away any need of this character, any drive for this character. Like, oh crap, I need to build a fire so I can stay warm. Oh crap, I need to build a fort so I can stay warm, so I can be protected from the elements. Oh crap, I need to find some kind of jacket. Like, it takes away the survival element because he's no longer in danger. So he has no goals, no immediate goals. There's nothing to do. So I don't understand making the character so needlessly OP, and that is what it is. Michael is good at everything and indestructible. Looking up information, below 50, you can get hypothermia in 5 minutes. At below 30, it takes 10 minutes if dressed inappropriately. So whether you feel it or not, being in a low temperature does lower your body temperature. He reminds us that he got every Scout merit badge by the time that he was 12, even the heavily physical ones, and apparently he gives up super easy despite, how difficult difficult some of those badges are to actually get, he still persevered. This comes up because he learned to dig into the ground for food and digs out worms out of the dirt because that's where he's getting food in the middle of winter. Then randomly a black horse appears and he offers it an apple to try to tame it. I don't know where he got an apple in the middle of a 1692 winter, but here we are. And why wasn't he eating that apple instead of the worms? Why is he not building a fishing rod and fishing when there's water right there? If he can build a guitar, which he did when he talked about learning how to play instruments, he said he built his own instruments. If he can build a guitar, he can build a freaking fishing rod. I'm sure that he's looked at the schematics of a fishing rod at least once before, which means he knows how to build one. He hangs out at this junction area a little bit, befriends the black horse, and then names it. You guessed it. Darkness. Add Master Horse, Tamer, and Rider to the list of endless skills. It doesn't take very long at all to tame, and it wasn't even difficult. Michael's just looking for a place to live now with very little foot traffic. Add Horse Whispering to Michael's abilities because he tells Darkness that the trees over yonder are edible, and it paws the ground in approval. I didn't even know that horses had paws. And this wild horse that had been living up on its own until now ain't going to be able to determine what it can eat? Really? It needs a human to tell it what brush it can eat. How did it even survive to its old age of whatever it is? Michael also thinks about this time when he was a teenager and he built his own cabin in the woods, so that's what he's going to do now. He cuts down 40 trees in one day. I'm no lumberman, but that seems like a lot. I guess that means that he's got unending physical strength and no exertion, especially when lacking proper food, since all he's been eating is worms. The dude builds a house in 3 days, and this is despite all of the physical labor he's been doing. He's not losing any weight, though. Bro, at this point, you're so OP that you're defying the laws of thermodynamics because the author just wants you to be obese, and I don't understand why. Michael also develops a couple of boo-boos from the labor, which include some infected cuts, but don't worry. He's learned how to make penicillin in the Scouts. Did he do that in the same time they learned how to make meth and cocaine? Quote, to him, antibiotics were history's single greatest discovery for extending human lifespans. With all this limitless skills in building, carpentry, unending physical energy, and forest chemistry, at any point to make frickin' penicillin in the middle of winter, there's no way that this guy was unsuccessful in the modern day. This does not work. And this character, at least 1/4 of the way through this novel, will never struggle because he's so OP that he has everything he needs at any given time. And if he doesn't have it, it is provided to him immediately. He develops it immediately. Despite all of this working out in his favor, Michael still is so pathetic that he considers giving up. But Darkness, with his never-ending magical friendship, motivates Michael to keep going. He's growing what he needs to make penicillin, a barn, a kiln, basically Minecraft in real life happening, and all is successful, and he's selling carved utensils for money and food. Then he's like, maybe I can do something with precious metals for money. Flashback with TC, who was his friend who was going to be a neurosurgeon, talking about a really cool woman that he met who was just so amazing and outdid everything that he did or said to try to impress her. But this was specifically brought up because that girl said something about gold being found in New Hampshire, so that's where Michael is going to go. He searches for 3 days, finds pyrite, and then thinks, no, I should just give up. Life is so hard. Why do things never work out for me? I only found fool's gold, not the real thing. Everything does work out for him, and he sits here and complains because he has to put in an effort, period, and he complains that it's not working out for him when he has to put in any effort. He says that his family would say that it's impressive that he built a 4-room cabin with a fireplace in 3 weeks, but anyone could do that. Meh, it's not that important. Any school teacher could freaking build a house in 3 days. Dude also complains that he's only lost 30 pounds, no thanks to himself. It was only because he's been starving and doing nonstop physical labor. As if eating less and moving more is not the typical prescription to lose weight. He makes gear for mining and refining ore like it's nothing, and then talks to Darkness about moving all of the weight because he's a badass. Like, all of the weight from the ore. He's like, Darkness, I know it's going to be a lot to put on you, but you're a badass. A complete badass. Like complete darkness, but complete badass. And that means that you can pull twice your own weight. That's how it works. The more badass you are, the higher the multiplier of your strength. And so I know you were at least 2 or 3 times badass. Now give me a nay. if you agree. We get Darkness pawing the ground again while Michael acts like a Disney princess and talking to the horse. Then, to my surprise, he does deliver packages to the 2 families that he stole from, and then he's like, well, at least my thievery and bad actions resulted in good things for other people who looked like they were having a hard time. I don't feel so bad for stealing from them now. Of course. Michael's just gonna have a good time and never be punished for anything. I'm wondering how Michael can even complain so much about nothing working out for him when literally everything works out for him. Meanwhile, Julie is out here having called for help after waking up in the middle of winter in a nightgown, and she went straight to being sexually assaulted, humiliated, and accused of being a witch. Now she just sits in a dungeon rotting. BT Dubs, speaking of Julie, let's get back to her. The women from before come into her dungeon to clean her, though not that well, not as well as last time. Then she is released by some random guy who decides that he doesn't think that she's a witch. Julie has done nothing to get there and nothing to get out. It's just a story happening to the characters because reasons. That's something that kills it for me. It's like you can have a story that happens to a character because the character is passive and that's part of the story. But if the character makes no actions to do anything, doesn't show any motivation, doesn't show any desire, she doesn't even have the desire to live, then there is no tension, there's no drive in your story. When she's sneaking around, she hears townspeople talking about burning her at the stake for being a witch. She gets away at first, but she's ultimately caught by tripping on everything and then being chased by dogs. She's brought back to the dungeon. I don't know why they didn't just go straight to execution, because clearly she's already been called a witch and she just tried to escape. Feels like a hanging is in order. Once she's back, she's assaulted by Paris, who is a community leader of sorts. He's going to keep coming back, though the sheriff comes in and tells him to get the frick out of this room. She's in a lot of pain and she goes to the witch trial again. She's put in a cage. Stuff is thrown at her as she is taken to the courtroom. The dude who helped her is brought in and he's bleeding out one of his ears from being punished. And we get, quote, she couldn't help but feel some guilt. It's kind of insane that she only feels some guilt for that when she carries all of this guilt from her sister drowning in the lake, even though that really wasn't her fault. The character is so unbelievably inconsistent that I don't know why they even have the backgrounds that they do. She gets condemned to death for witchcraft while going back and forth in her mind trying to guess if this is the death cult or time travel. She writes goodbye letters to her husband and her parents. She's put in, quote, one of those off-white dresses. Can we get a description, please? Now, apparently, we find out there are thousands in this population of not even 1,000 people colony have gathered to watch the hanging of this rando in the woods. A quick Google search tells you that there were only maybe 500 people living in Salem at the time of the Salem witch trials, and the entire town was involved. But it was not thousands of people. So she is hanged and dying and unable to breathe in the air. Then we go back to Michael, who says that he is obviously wants to return to the future. I don't know why he wants to return to the future, because he's got his own house. He's successful already. He says there's nothing for him in the future. It's only been about a month, and this is the first time that he has also mentioned actually going home. It just pops up in his head. If I could just build a time machine. But it's not like the instructions will just pop into my head. I'm glad that the story is just like, I'll do it though. Levels of doability. Michael's got the cheat code so that he can get all kinds of metal pipes and plastic to make whatever he wants. Literally just feels like a stupid survival game, where it thinks crafting menus is how technological development actually works. And he also procures a white mare that he names, guess the name of the white horse, the white mare. You got 3, 2, 1, Angel. So yeah, the horses are black and white named Darkness and Angel. I will share this description of the gun placed in here because anyone who knows guns will be bothered, since that's kind of what happened on the server when this was shared. Quote, Michael was pleased by the rifle musket he was able to purchase in Concord. It had been custom made in Germany, specifically for hunting. It had a 40-inch barrel and used a relatively small 40 caliber ball. It was the closest thing to a modern weapon that he would likely ever find in the 1692 Massachusetts. The man who owned it had recently died and his widow sold it to him. Also, obviously, he hasn't shot this gun before, nor has he shot it in a while, but don't worry. He's OP at shooting too. He catches a bull elk with ease and brings it back. When he gets home, he gets knocked out by someone that he didn't see and wakes up tied to a post. Then he goes into his memories as he a few weeks ago when he ran into some American Indian hunting tribe and decided that he would learn their language since all he has to do is hear the word in the translation once and then he knows it. He learned a lot of languages. This includes 6 different native languages, one of which was Navajo, and he learned that straight from visiting the Navajo Nation itself. So again, tell me how he has no stable job or income, because he could be a literal translator for lots of things. Now, with all of this knowledge, he is just going to reverse engineer the language of the tribe around him in the current moment. He communicates his name using his mother's maiden name, which I don't even understand why he chose his mother's maiden name, when that's not the name that he actually goes by in modern era. But everybody in the world recognizes his last name, Whitaker, and is like, oh my gosh, Lord Whitaker, your family are friends and saviors of mine. Apparently, his family line goes back generations for taking care of this tribe. And they're going to use their meager supplies in this time to celebrate Michael's being there because his family is that special. Also, the random horse that he tamed couldn't be caught and tamed by anybody in this tribe. Chief meets with Michael, says that he lives outside of time to help them, and then gives him crystals. Michael returns home. His engineering machine has made tons of plastic. He fights off a cougar without trouble because this cougar just gets into his house, gets to him and attacks him. Why did it have to happen? I guess to just show off his badassery. His wounds got infected from the fight, and so he uses the penicillin to prove that it worked. He's literally doing chemistry as he has a dangerous fever after a cougar attack. One of the longest descriptions in this book that there are. None of it matters, though. He survives. Dude is doing this small project of wind power generator now, and then LEDs to light his house in 1692. And, Julie's the one on trial for being a witch. You know that they tried males for being witches too, right? There were like 5 men that were hanged in Salem witch trials for being accused of being witches. Just saying. Then he takes a bath in his tub that he made and tries to relax. Flashback to his mom dropping him off at the airport, and he says that knowledge is getting to be worthless. She says that she's worried he's chasing after the family treasure, and she says that she should have fought harder to have him stay in school, to get him in school, to get him scholarships. And he's like, no one would have helped me. I understand. Bro, you're a super genius. Elite universities would eat you up. Like, they want them accolades. They want you to go and make things to build up their credibility so that they can get more people to put money in them. Dude now says that any 2-bit high schooler could do all of the engineering that he's done so far, and now it's time to go and build a Tesla machine and mining bore. And while he does that, he's also insulting himself for being unable to make a time machine. It's not like that's unrealistic or anything. It's not like bending time is, kind of an insane thing to even think about doing. He finds about 50 million current year dollars worth of gold and silver from dynamiting the countryside, and somehow nobody nearby noticed or came looking to see what the frick was going on. And then he's going along the area selling stuff, and when he gets to Salem, it's empty. Suspiciously empty. He hears a ruckus, and then he finds Julie hanging from a tree, surrounded by a crowd watching her die. Switch over to Julie as she astral projects in her death to experience the feelings of everything before being brought back to her body. So she's like flying around, and there are just beams of light of emotions, and she's like getting in people's faces, and she's all up in the face of Paris, who is like being a little asshole, and then she like slaps him, but then she's sucked back into her body. And she can't believe that she is dead. Then she eventually finds her way to some version of her sister on a heavenly plane, and her sister makes her give up on the lake death. She's like, you need to tell me it wasn't your fault. Repeat after me, it wasn't your fault. And so she agrees. And that is how Julie gets over the trauma of blaming herself for her sister's death. No struggle. Again, it's so shallow. There's no work put into it. It doesn't even matter. Her sister shouldn't have existed. Her husband shouldn't have existed because they don't matter in the long run. I don't understand the point of this. After all of that, Jessica then asks how Julie's life is going. And Jessica's talking about how brilliant she is, how she got her degrees, how she has a TV show. And Jessica's like, oh, you have a TV show? What's it called? And she's like, for 5 years. It's called Bull Markets. Oh, of course. I know how much you love business. I try to improve myself every day. I'm at Columbia so much I'm taking one class after the next. The people people say I should move in. You gotta keep your mind sharp," her sister tapped her on the temple. "Have you earned your place on Mount Genius yet, up there with Da Vinci, Newton, and Einstein? Have you solved one of the greatest mysteries of science, like how life began, or what came first, the chicken or the egg?" "Not yet." Jess always made her laugh. "What's the last thing that you studied?" "Software design and programming languages. I was learning how to become a hacker." "You always were a natural with the algorithms. Your handle could be Gravity, Vixen." They laughed together. "You know, Newton's muse." I was reading this and I thought, could this be any more arrogant and stuck up? Is it just me? Is that just mean? For no reason whatsoever, she's given the choice of whether to come back to life or to move on into the afterlife. And Julie chooses to return to life so that she can see her husband, Aiden, again. And then there's this really bizarre switch to reframe all of the scenes of being captured and taken away from Aiden, some FBI agent making her say something into a camera. Everything is reframed as a TV show with this guy from the plane, then abusing her in a bathtub, and her flying around trying to get to the sky but being blocked. It's unnecessary and repetitive, and I thought it was dumb. Michael decided that the best way to save the accused witch from being hanged is to look like a demon on a demon horse with a literal flaming sword. So he dumps like gasoline or oil all over his sword, lights it on fire, and dude has a moment in the middle of the reaction to wonder if he's going to be the inspiration for the Headless Horseman, because in that moment it would look like he has no head. He definitely is thinking of himself like that. The author is really showing me their hand at this moment, just how much this is a power fantasy self-insert. Like going, look at how cool my main character is, for real though. Also, it means that while he's doing this, no one will recognize him because his face is going to be blotted out. So no consequences for intervening on this hanging. Michael gets to Julie, brings her back to his house, and revives her with CPR. He also bathes her and is thinking that he has never seen a woman naked before. Quote, now that his adrenaline was back to normal, embarrassment washed over him as he let the tattered remains of her shift drop to the floor. He averted his eyes. He had never seen a woman naked in person before, let alone touched one. This whole section just has really weird vibes from how Michael is approaching it. Quote, his first concern was her injuries that might need urgent care. He bathed her gently, making sure to inspect her for any maladies. The bruises around her neck were the most obvious, but she was covered in scabs and lacerations, and there were deep bruises around her wrists and ankles. What the hell happened to you? Those look like marks made by crude shackles. Michael carefully turned Julie's wrists to wash the dried blood off. It looks like they had you in those for some time. He saw similar injuries on her ankles. A quick rush of anger came at the thought of anyone doing this to Julie. He let out another deep sigh and focused on the sore on her stomach. What is this? This has festered. It's small, but... He looked at her face. Her eyes were closed as if she was sleeping. Who the hell could have done this to you? Michael finished by cleaning the infection on the sole of her foot. He began to wonder how she had survived these injuries for so long. She was obviously malnourished and dehydrated. Michael gently patted her body dry and then carried her into the bedroom. I cleaned it up all nice for you. He laid her on the bed and pulled the blanket up to her chest. He wrapped rags packed with snow around her neck, wrists, and ankles. The infection in her left foot still looked bad. Before placing the cold cloth over her eyes, he opened them. Her pupil response was encouraging. While she appeared to be in a light coma, there was clear signs of brain function. She was breathing on her own, so chances for recovery were good. Michael looked down at the sleeping beauty. If you don't wake up soon, you probably never will. And there's absolutely no way a kiss from me would do the trick. He creates an IV and dresses her wounds, caring for her for a while, and he's so uncomfortable, dude. Quote, Michael sat by her bed and took her hand in his, observing how much the bruises had faded from her wrists. He checked her vitals. All normal. The more time passed, the more normal and beautiful she became. He put the lotion on her skin. Rising to leave, he reached out and traced the purple rings around her neck. I had hoped that she would have awakened by now. And with that, he left her to slumber. He tells the horses of his plans to live here and fake an identity after they sing together. We now find out he is also a master forager. He is thinking about how Julie has been out for a week, and that's not a good sign. If she's out much longer, then she is probably going to be out forever, but he doesn't want to be the one to pull the plug. Just as he's thinking this, luck would have it, she is waking up. She spends some time getting dressed, looking at everything, confused by the mixture of old-fashioned and new technology, and doesn't know where she is. She's talking about feeling hopeless. She goes into the other room, sees Michael, and thinks that he's a cult leader who drugged her and abused her. He can't stay around to talk to her because he has to leave like it's urgent when he's just going to go to the market and sell stuff. Dude is literally an entrepreneur just selling stuff. He doesn't have to run. He doesn't even manage the food of the village. Other people do the food. He came out of nowhere. He does freaking ore and goods. I think you can put off your travel to help acclimate this woman that you say that you care about to this surrounding because she is so freaked out. But it's like he really doesn't care and she's just an inconvenience. Quote, she wasn't sure what was real. Some of the things that she thought were real now felt more like dreams. What do you mean? How you thought this would go? He shrugged, snorted, and rolled his eyes. Now thinking about it, I guess I should have expected this. Of course, if I try to do something to help someone, it all blows up in my face. Because she thinks that she was molested and she doesn't know where the frick she is. She couldn't figure out if it was all an act. For the first time, she was beginning to doubt that he was the one responsible. Then he looked at her and said, "Oh, I stupidly thought that I might get thanked for saving you, for caring for you. But it doesn't matter. I'm glad that you're feeling better. I have to go." He turned to the horse. "Mr. Nice Guy over here." This doesn't read frustrated. It reads like a nice guy who thinks that he is owed favors because he helped her. Like he only helped her because he thought he would get favors. He's like, just shut the frick up and get out of the way. People are just demanding on me. Julie is so hysterical that he just pushes her off while she has a gun pointing at him. She shoots, misses, and just to add to the nice guy thing, he goes, quote, "You want me to reload that for you so you can shoot at me again?" She drops the gun. Michael says that he's leaving, and she's like, "Wait, I don't want to be here alone." Michael is pissed that she's having a breakdown and that she doesn't know what's going on, and he has no ability to even try to understand someone that might have been abused, that might have been through some things, that has been in a freaking dungeon for how many weeks. And then it feels like we're hitting some hardcore isekai wish fulfillment now with, quote, "He knew literally nothing about this woman, but her seesawing attitude toward him was giving him whiplash. He felt that he should better explain. While I'm not the monster that you believe me to be, I am repulsive. I'm sure that you don't want to be in such close contact with me." And then she's allowed to go. Dude literally miladies Julie onto the horse. They go around the neighborhood, and the dude's already having Julie referred to as the mistress with his last name, when she didn't even take her husband's last name. So he's already cucking her husband before this goes anywhere. Maybe Michael should ask what Julie wants to do and her relationship status before, hitting on her. Then he takes Julie to see the tribe that he befriended, gave them 200 silver coins before she is impressed that he speaks the language, and she's asking how he knows it, and he is getting annoyed at her for not knowing why he knows this stuff. This section hits wish fulfillment really hard. Everyone loves Michael. The chief tells Julie that she was chosen to be Michael's wife, and then they retire for the night. Quote, "A pit formed in Julie's stomach. A feeling of unease came over her as the walls seemed to begin to shrink. I don't think, of course I know that you would never do anything like that with me. Ugh. But they think that you're my wife. You don't have to worry. I'll take the ground. But we need to pretend we're, you know." He raised and lowered an eyebrow quickly. She started to get angry. Then he broke out in a laugh. "I'm kidding. Relax. I promise nothing'll happen in the night." He laid down and fell asleep. The entire village became silent, but Julie was still awake with her thoughts. She still knew nearly nothing about Michael. He'd barely spoke to her during their 2-day ride, and usually only when she spoke to him. Despite her initial thoughts about him, which were clouded by what she realized had been coma dreams, she was impressed by his seemingly unconscious generosity and ability to forgive things others did to him. She knew She knew some of it was based on obvious depression, but she thought that it went deeper than that. It seemed to be his true baseline nature. He always seemed to be intentionally keeping her at a distance. She wasn't sure why, but it was beginning to make her feel alone again. Here, in 1692. She wakes up thinking that Michael might have abused her, having bad dreams, not knowing where she is. And then Michael immediately pushes her into, one, you're now my wife, and two, making you should act the part jokes. How about putting a chill on that for a little bit, sir? Suddenly now, though Michael has been drooling on Julie, waiting for her to wake up, I'm sure that he's saying this because he is depressed that she is not obsessed with him the same way he has been obsessed with her. Michael is now saying, quote, this period might be hard for single women, but she should be fine. This dude saved her from a hanging, and he wants to ditch her because she's not sucking his dick fast enough. Apparently, he's also unable to plan that they are either siblings or she is widowed. Again, for geniuses, and a dude who knows this time period really well, so he says, he's not really trying. So they're hanging out separately. She comes into the barn that he's working in to say that she's made dinner. He is so captured by her beauty. He holds his breath to look at her. You see it multiple times. He holds his breath to look at her. She holds her breath to look at him a few times. They go inside and talk specifically about James Cameron's Avatar. I bet he's like, it's the best movie ever, and I'm going to tell you freaking why it's the best movie ever. He keeps asking her what her plans are while refusing to tell her what his are, which include him trying to build a time machine. So he's going to build a secret time machine, not tell her that he's going to try to get back to modern era, and then just leave her in 1692. Like, what is the point of that? She's like, he is so generous. Meanwhile, he wants to build a secret time machine and not take her back to her family. For what purpose? For what purpose would he hide this other than to hold it over her head to be like, be my wife, or I'm not helping you get to your family. Like, those are the choices. Quote, he seemed unused to being pushed so hard. I didn't want to influence your decisions with false hope, but if you want to know my plan, it's this. I will move to Boston, or even London if I must, to gain access to whatever I think will help me figure out how this happened to me, to us, and how I can get home. Is it really possible? Her heart began to rise. Anything is possible, but probable? No, I don't have anything else to do while I'm here. But you have a real life. I know it's hard, but you could have a real life. I know it's hard, but once you realize that you're not going to be able to get back, you can find someone here who can love you, maybe have children. You're telling me to move on, to forget about Aiden and my family? He rubbed his hand across his face. No, I didn't mean it like that. Maybe you can move on from people that you care about that easily, but I can't. Tears came down her eyes. You say that you have nothing else to do. Well, I have something else to do. I have something else you can do. You can go to hell. He looked away, like he was gathering his thoughts. I'm sorry. I know that I'm a terrible person. She was about to cut in, but he raised a hand to stop her. No, it's true. Which was the point I was trying to make earlier. She considered interjecting again, but he gave her a look to stem any further discussion on that matter. I know. I was just trying to explain that you need to make a decision about who you are. I know. I don't know if you understand the intricacies of the 17th century society. Can you affirm who you are? It's a difficult change. So he's gonna say how hard of a change it is, how different society is, while also pushing her out the door to be like, go and have a life without me. You're totally fine. It's better that way. Like, you don't need to live with me. At the very least, I can give His Name Was Augustine series this benefit where Swanee told Joel that they should stick together because they're from the same timeline, and it would be easier for them to pretend because they understood each other in a way that other people couldn't. But like, this is so BS. It really just feels like manipulation to get her in the vulnerable position on her knees, both figuratively and literally. And Julie with her 3 PhDs, it's okay if she is socially inept with her 3 PhDs because that makes sense. But like, Julie, where do those come in handy for you? Because they don't do anything. Then Michael brags about, while he's over here talking about how horrible he is and how bad he is at everything, he's also bragging about how brilliant he is. Quote, I'm not going to call myself an expert, but I've studied temporal mechanics when I was young, and let's pretend I'm really as smart as I always claimed to be. Wait, I'm just curious. How smart did you always claim to be? Well, Michael stammered. I always said that I was a modern-day Leonardo da Vinci. He rubbed his face and continued. But I digress. I would say maybe 1 in a million. And even then, it would probably take the rest of my life. Okay, so this whole thing is actually scam to blackmail Julie into being his wife. That's what I believe. Even after he's found out that she wants to get to the present to be with her husband, because he only sees her options are, because he says her only options are to remain because he says her only options are to remain in 1692 and marry someone else, or become a spinster without him, or pretend to be his wife, and then maybe he will build a time machine and they can return to the present. But, he also adds to the fear-mongering position, quote, he came out of his malaise. The only single women of this age, not including girls, are usually prostitutes. Unmarried girls usually live with their fathers. Unmarried men and women don't live together. I could be your sister. You could, but then you would be pursued by every eligible man in the colonies. And if you reject them all, people would think something was wrong with you. You would be a social pariah. You might think that you won't care, but I know what it's like to be a loner. I'm used to it, but most people want a social life. She was already tired, and his constant self-denigration was exhausting. So I'm your sister if I want to move on. I'm your wife if I hope to get home. What about you? What about me? If I pretend to be your wife, won't that prevent you from having any intimate relationships? Maybe you would want to get married at some point. He laughed out loud. That's funny! What's funny? He laughed again. Married? The only way a woman would marry me was if I were rich. And well, I suppose that's more possible here than in our time. I don't think that I would ever do that. And the only way a woman might share a bed is if I paid them. So you don't have to worry about my non-existent sex life. Bleh. If it hasn't happened by now, it probably never will. Meanwhile, he's got 50 million modern dollars, so he is already a rich guy. So, like, bro. The scene ends with him confirming that he is a virgin and says goodnight, milady, and then leaves Julie to think about her decision. Something brought up in the chat/discussion of this book as we were reading was how she could have been a widow and how a wealthy widow at this time was highly motivated to remain single. Michael said that he was highly educated in this time period and has shown it with all of his knowledge adjusting. So the implication here is that he knew this but didn't tell her because he wanted to force her hand into being his wife so that he could. It's a metaphor. Julie waits for Michael to come around, but Michael avoids her for 2 days. When he finally comes to dinner, she asks him what he's been working on, and he won't tell her. Again, he's just manipulative. He says it doesn't matter. This guy is already exhibiting more than a few controlling abuser tactics. Eventually, Julie obviously accepts to play the wife because she wants to get back to her family. Michael teaches her Baroque dancing, which he also apparently learned in his poverty-stricken childhood, among other dances and all sorts of etiquette from this period, and takes her to a seamstress to get some fitted dresses. A breakthrough comes when Michael compares himself to Thomas Edison to again show how OP he is. Quote, Michael had a breakthrough, and unlike Edison's 10,000 tries, it only took 112 attempts to finish the prototype for his mining bore. He had spent every spare moment that he had working on this project, and it was time for the test. They took the bore about a mile south for a trial run. It's a mining machine that no one has tried to make in the modern era that's brilliant and powered by kinetic energy pulled out of the air. Endless, renewable energy. No cost. Julie asks why no one has done it before. It doesn't seem impossible. And Michael is like, because in modern era, nobody is humble and altruistic and everybody is just greedy and wants money except me. Julie is like, wow. And Michael could solve all of the world's energy needs in this green way. She is upset that he could do this, but has kept it to himself. But she won't criticize because he's got a frail ego that seems like he will cry if she says anything, and then she won't be taken home. They are preparing to move to Boston, building a bigger mining bore to get richer, and now they are married. He presents a ring to her, and Julie is hesitant because it feels like she's cheating on Aiden. She doesn't even say anything, but he goes, don't worry, I'm not gonna try anything on you, winky face. I'd be like, cool, I didn't assume that you would, but now I'm wondering why you would randomly say that because it feels like something is on your mind. They practice their alibis together for Julie's sake, since Michael doesn't forget anything, and he reminds her that his ability to total recall is why he believes that he is like Leonardo da Vinci. But it's just not that big of a deal, you know? His memory of everything, it's not so much. It's nothing to write home about. It's like not like it's special or anything, but it is special, but it's not. That's what he keeps saying. Julie is super impressed by how smart he is, by his Leonardo da Vinci style amounts of smartness. And she's like, do you know how rare that is? And I was like, you can't keep comparing yourself to Leonardo da Vinci and in the same breath say that it's no big deal, which is what you just done did. Michael wonders if with the millions of gold and silver they have and all of the resources, will it be enough to prove legitimacy? I would think that it would. Like, if this doesn't prove legitimacy, what would? They didn't have much paperwork or a federal government back then, bro. So they're like, what are you looking for exactly? And then he turns to Julie, thinking of how beautiful she is and so smart, even though he never used her knowledge to his abilities to get, more stuff done and just got impatient for her not knowing things. But she is still Einstein and a supermodel's body, and he's like, man, no matter what, I never had a chance. He is still saying that he never has a chance because he is fat and ugly, which frankly he should be ripped after all of the physical labor he's been doing. He doesn't acknowledge that she even has a husband, and she keeps saying, he doesn't even acknowledge at this point that she has a husband, and she keeps saying that she's going to get back to her husband, and the whole reason that she said, hey, I'll be your wife, was so that she could get back to her husband. She literally told the angel sister that she needed to go back to Earth to get back to her husband. So like that's all of her motivations. And yeah, if you're guessing if Aiden's gonna get cucked again, yeah, he is. It kind of made me wonder, not only does it feel like a self-insert fantasy, but it made me wonder if this was a way of the author kind of dealing with a situation where they had been pursuing a woman who had gone with another guy, and this was like the way to write them getting the one that got away. Because I've seen that in books before. I know of somebody who had lost a girlfriend and then wrote a book where he got with that girl and then presented it to her. So I wonder, not claiming anything, but it is a bizarre choice, especially when Aiden doesn't matter. After all of the training, Julie is worried about fitting in and expectations and worries if Aiden will even wait for her when she returns to the present. She prays and uses her voice, telling her to never give up to motivate herself forward. They toast to good luck and eat some tater tot casserole, where I wonder where they got all of the ingredients for tater tot casserole. Who knows? They leave the next morning. Julie is now drooling all over Michael randomly after just promising to her husband that she would stay faithful, that she would get there. But whatever. She's holding her breath, turning red, feeling embarrassed, feeling horny and turned on and attracted to Michael. And he's so attracted to her and they're both embarrassed. And she's kind of like, won't take advantage of the opportunities he knew would come. I am so sad. I don't want to say, please touch me. But just do it, Michael, please. Julie is nervous about pretending to be someone that she's not. Michael is trying to comfort her because he knows that she was in Boston before when she was at Harvard before. She says that was when she was 14 and she wasn't even equal with her peers because she was so much younger than her peers. They reach Boston, get to the best room because Michael's name gets him into everything. It's basically a social key that just unlocks all of the doors. They get attacked immediately by bandits who all are taken down quickly anyway before the governor's employee shows up to summon them to the governor's house because his name got into the governor's ears. They meet with the governor to buy land that comes with slaves, and Julie is outraged, but Michael is like giving her the corrective eyes that she needs to shut the frick up and let him deal with this. She says that she's going to go outside. He tells her to calm down, and once he buys the land, he releases all the slaves. It's such a bizarre thing for how upset Julie gets at seeing the slaves when she knows this time period that was normal. If she wants to fit in, she needs to be less hysterical. And we're told how smart she is all the time, but at every turn she has to prove it, she doesn't. Now, Michael gives them the opportunity to be freed slaves or to stay employees where they will get paid wages. Most of them decide that they would like to be returned to their homes. And so then he heads over to the local Harvard college and tells them that he wants to fund them to make them better than Cambridge and Oxford. So this is going to end up building like the science buildings at Harvard. Michael gets back after doing all of this stuff. Is it because he's a moron or is it because he's lying? When he comes back and says the butterfly effect is not in play here, otherwise they wouldn't even be here. I mean, he's already mined a bunch of gold and silver that should have gone to other people. So anybody who was supposed to have that gold and silver is not going to have it. Their investments are gone. There's now plastic and that random wooden house out there that was built that has amenities, that has LEDs that are going to be found. This is going to have its own History Channel network special, at least 6 or 7 of them, talking about how this is proof of aliens because in 1692 Boston, Salem area, there were LEDs and plastic and special energy machines that just suck energy out of the atmosphere. And he says that there is going to be no changes to history because of this. But also, the thing that comes up with this from a storytelling perspective is that it tells you there are no stakes. He can't mess up the future. He doesn't have any weaknesses. He can't lose. He can't forget anything. He can't anything. So there's just what is left? Nothing. There's nothing. The next meeting at Harvard, Julia is just there, and Michael strong arms the guys that it's fine that she participates. Then Julie is in charge of projects, and she hires a black woman in 1962 to be in a manager position at the house. I'm sure that no one will have an issue with this, and they'll blend in just fine. No one challenges her, and then she goes on to tell Michael, but ends up thirsting on him. Quote, Michael had been overseeing the planting of the crops, and she went out to inform him of her decisions. As she rounded the side of the barn, she saw him take his muddy shirt off and begin to wash himself. She had to fight back some lustful thoughts as the water streamed down his rippled chest. She suddenly felt guilt as her thoughts betrayed Aiden. She was about to turn and go. Julie, did you want to talk? She stammered in embarrassment. Well, I came to tell you I'm putting Rose in charge of the property manager. Good choice. You okay? Of course. Looks like you lost some weight. Her words had betrayed her. Yeah, it's called time travel diet. It'll be the next big fad when we get back. Ha! Did you need something else? Of course, he mocks her. Then she goes away and she's like, oh my God, he is so hot. But then she's like telling herself that it's fine to think that he's hot because it's not actually cheating because she didn't physically touch his body. It's just thinking that he's hot and it's fine. Quote, once back at the house, she sat down and took a deep breath to try to keep herself settled. This was not supposed to happen. Michael was never ugly, but she certainly never viewed him in such a fashion before. She almost wished that he had stayed chubby. Now she had made a total fool of herself, and he would know that she was becoming attracted to him. She would have to stay much stronger for Aiden. Julie was looking in the vanity mirror. It's only physical, she told herself. You then get this smarmy section where it feels like he's stringing her along, hoping that she gives up on time travel and falls for him. Quote, she felt aggravated. Why are we spending so much time and resources on this property? Shouldn't we be focusing this on time travel? There's nothing stopping you from making that your focus, but this is a challenge on par with interstellar travel. I feel that we need to establish ourselves first, and this estate must reflect the perceptions of us. Fine. You don't have to justify it to me. I'm just tagging along with your plan. You know that's not how I feel. Do you really have to be in the same suite together? Do we really have to be in the same suite together? She lost herself and felt her eyes go wide. Of course not. I have some things I need to attend to anyway. Good night. He quickly exited. Julie didn't understand the reaction. Michael thinks about how he doesn't know how to interact with women. Then, a few days later, Julie finds him sleeping in the loft, says that they're going to the governor's ball. Like, don't you remember, Michael? Duh. And, he doesn't need to apologize or change his plans. They can just keep doing what they're doing. He can come live inside again. They both look at each other and are amazed at how beautiful they are. And at the ball, someone challenges Michael's use of his family name and calls Julie a whore. That's going to be a constant throughout. Every time Julie does something, she's a whore of Satan, whore Michael punches the guy and makes him apologize, and the guy says, "You will pay." The two of them are then talking about how to get through time and trying to figure out how they even got here in the first place. They say that it's related to the Bermuda Triangle since it's close to Cape Canaveral, but that doesn't really explain how it literally only took the two of them, and they haven't run into anybody else that is also from their timeline. Actually, that would have been a pretty interesting twist to kind of throw in there, or surprise to throw in there, where it's just you keep running into like random people and have people from modern year colonizing 1692, or, just the jails are full of everybody killed during the Salem witch trials were just time travelers. The two of them weren't even in the water. They weren't in the same place. They weren't traveling toward the Bermuda Triangle. So the fact that they were just kind of sucked into something and then thrown in the back doesn't really make any sense, except to go with the idea of I'm special and looking at the author's hands, literally reaching into Cape Canaveral and then yeeting them across the country. Michael says that it probably happened to that yacht many years ago, the one that Caitlin was in the prologue. Julie just questions him, and then immediately Michael starts getting upset because how dare she question him. It just makes him feel bad, saying, "Of course not, because it's my thoughts and I'm an idiot. Fine." Because he's depressed, Julie goes to him. Julie goes to him and tells him that he's brilliant and he needs to stop being such a baby because he is so smart. Like, gosh dang it. Then they check on the progress at Harvard, tell off the president because he says that Julie should be at home. And she's like, well, you don't belong at Harvard. Tee-hee, you're not smart enough to be here like me. The dude huffs off, unable to answer, like any poorly considered bad man. It makes me think of the guys in... Did Ben Shapiro's book do this? I know that Amygdala did this. And a lot of books that have ideological bad guys in there, or just really poorly written bad guys that they don't want to put any effort into, just like get insulted and then go, well, and then stomp off. At this point, Julie questions if Michael ever saw a picture of Harvard's science building. He says no, he just made that one up on the spot. And she's like, bruh, this is the building that I went to. This is proof that we are affecting the timeline, and we were the ones that actually did build Harvard. That, or he stole the design from someone else since he's got a photographic memory. All he has to do is see the building once, and then he can build it, even if he doesn't know the labeling on the building. Michael then says nothing is majorly shifting because they haven't actually done anything huge in the past to cause a major effect. But I'd say that electricity thing, plastic, mining all of the ore and gold in that area, buying the land so somebody else can't have it, intervening in Harvard, are all major events. Later that night, restless, Julie finds Michael teaching himself martial arts outside because he studied different art forms and philosophies of every martial arts out there that he could find. So now he is training in them. By studying, I mean he read books, and so obviously he internalized how to do them by reading books. Julie also becomes a master, training herself. Randomly, some kung fu master shows up and becomes their private kung fu master to make them better than everybody else in the entire world. They throw a party. Thousands from the New England area show up, including the tribe that Michael became friends with and the judge of Julie's trial. Michael gets her away from that guy, and he holds her through the panic that she's feeling, just so that she's safe. Now christening the boat that Michael made, he's sending the freed slaves back on this boat that is semi like a yacht. Quote, the ship had key-powered engines and water jet propulsions, defensive systems to fend off potential attacks, a desalinization system, proximity detectors, sonar and radar systems, a stellar/solar orientation system that he designed for open water navigation. It was 3 decks above and 1 below. The interior had numerous cabins and lounges and a full kitchen. The top deck was the bridge. And somehow this is not changing history. This is not butterfly effect. It's not big enough. Now on the ocean, he's going to teach Julie Aikido and lists himself knowing more than half a dozen different fighting styles after relentless bullying. He also learned some weapons, methods, and parkour. Julie asks how he is so good, and he doesn't answer the question, just says that he learned a lot of things. Now that they're dropping people off in different countries, she says how she's been teaching the freed slaves English, and in response, they've been teaching her and Michael 4 different African languages and other European languages. It's just that easy. And they also know Mandarin, thanks to the Kung Fu Master. They get back to their boat being ransacked, but the 13 versus 2 is nothing to them because they've got the cheat codes. Julie takes out 4 of the attackers, and Michael gets the other 7. Apparently, they also don't have any staff. that helped them with any of this. Alone on the boat now, they're talking about their lives and what they were doing now and what they would be doing now if they weren't here. Bonding. Michael mentions how he has bad luck and was looking for treasure. I've seen no bad luck, and they're just going around the water looking for the possible time vortex. They get pulled into a hurricane, thrown around. Michael almost drowns. Julie saves him and he complains, quote, "Thank you for saving me, but I'm not worth your life." "You don't get to tell me what your life is worth." "You have people who care about you." "I don't want to argue." He was being stubborn, so she decided to drop it. She was happy that he was all right. He stared off blankly for a moment. "Death, honestly, didn't seem so bad," he said softly. Shut up, Michael. Oh, yeah. And while he was dying, he saw Jessica's angel/ghost, who also decided to randomly show up. This story is all over the place with no structure or believability or limits. And everything is just fine. So, like, there was no point in that except to make Michael friggin' pity himself again and Julie save him. It is now at the top of the witch trials. They also figure that they aren't going to age because they're outside of time. Julie is the one to bring this up because she hasn't had a period in 7 months, and she first thought that she might be pregnant. It would have been ironic if, it was Aiden's baby, considering they talked about having babies at the very beginning of the book. Maybe that would have been not ironic. It would have made sense because, foreshadowing, but whatever. She's also not showing it all, so Michael is like, "You're probably not pregnant." Their home is randomly attacked, but it's whatever. Again, they're just going to beat everybody who attacks them. Michael is still repeating that he has feelings for Julie, but she could never, ever, 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 ever love him, and she's got a husband anyway. Even if he was not fat anymore, he fails in a lot of other areas, and now he must build a wall around his heart so that it cannot be crushed because the girl of his dreams doesn't want him, can't want him. Witches die. Julie learns a million other languages. It's not impressive. Look, at some point, there's a diminishing return on how many things your characters can do. Like, if you stack things, they can do this, and this, and this. Like, Ralph over here can play the guitar, and the piano, and the drums. It makes sense that he would know how to play multiple instruments, especially with the background that he has. However, if you started knowing, like, 16 languages, and all of the instruments, and also sciences, and also finances, like, Casey is the one that does all the finances for the bar. Let's be real. The more that there's a point of diminishing return that your achievements are no longer impressive because they are just there. And so the fact that it keeps loading stuff onto both Julie and Michael aggressively makes them less impressive and actually more annoying. Because, of course, you're just like, well, of course they know every single language on the planet. Well, of course they have a mansion with electricity and a satellite dish in 1692. The witch trials finish without intervention because Michael says he doesn't want to affect any major events, but he did sternly lecture the town after they killed people on how it's bad. This acts as if inventing electricity, plastic, and mining all the ore in this area didn't change history. Julie needs a break, so she visits an apparent great friend that's barely mentioned, if not just mentioned for the first time, but whatever. They gossip about having sex, and I hate the trope of, "You wasting that man you are not sleeping with, girl. You better be sleeping with." So much of this just reminds me of freaking Guns and Smoke with all of those garbage freaking tropes. Quote, "With that and the harvest, how much time do you spend?" Cicely drew closer as they walked. "Trying." And they both laughed. "Unfortunately, not much," Julie said in a disappointed tone as both ladies composed themselves. "Julie, you are not letting that handsome man go to waste, are you?" From the first time they met, Cicely gushed over the idealized relationship she imagined Julie and Michael shared. She did feel some pangs of guilt for deceiving her friend, and for preventing any possible prospects for Michael. I hate the gossipy trope. Again, with freaking Guns and Smoke, you got like Jesse and Bonnie get together, and then they come back, and the guards at the gate are like hooting and hollering, and then Uncle and the aunt at the table are like hooting and hollering, and everybody always constantly being like, "You gonna get with them, girl, you gonna get with," just like the freaking the chief of the tribe in here was like, "Well, you were chosen to be Michael's wife," before she had even had any feelings for him. It was just like, you're gonna do it. It's not cute. It's creepy. I mean, in some cases you can make it work. In this, it did not work. Add this onto Julie randomly owning an orphanage now, so I guess more good points for her. This feels like a throwaway to make her look like a better person than she was, just like Swanee, and his name was Augustin, having a random domestic violence shelter that did nothing but attempt to make her look like a better person when she was an abuser in a relationship. But, you know, she blamed Joel. The two go for a swim at a private lake wearing custom-made bathing suits. Water rippling abs detected. Despite Julie's lake trauma, she has no problem engaging in a water fight and pulling each other underwater with no lifeguard whatsoever. Why even have Jessica exist if there is no trauma whatsoever from it? She's just a useless character. Bro also acquired all of the ingredients for sushi, albeit using kelp for seaweed. Julie feels bad that she only thought about Aiden once that day. He is such a stupid character too, who doesn't need to exist. Julie then gets attacked by some randos and the sheriff and deputy who beat her and stabbed her, and she does jujitsu on them. But she ends up on the ground and Michael finds her bleeding out. She pulls through, he's made morphine, and she makes him admit that it wasn't her fault that she got attacked. The attackers are dead. Julie killed them with her kung fu, and if you think that there's going to be any repercussions from this, is she going to think about it? Is she going to feel bad? Is there going to be any guilt? Is there going to be any repentance? No. This is the only time that it's mentioned. It doesn't stay on her conscience. She doesn't beg God for forgiveness despite being an obvious Catholic. Doesn't come up ever again. So again, why make people kill people if there's going to be zero consequences? Not even emotional consequences. Apparently, no further thought will be put into. Michael reminds himself that he's not allowed to have feelings for Julie at this time. Meanwhile, Julie's over here saying that she wants to be faithful to Aiden, but she is so freaking horny, dude. Like, she stalks Michael to his lounge where she finds a TV and couches and a fridge. And what the frick is a TV going to do in 1692 when there is no satellite, there are no channels? Like, what the frick does a TV do? He got a man cave in 1692. And this is from Mr. I Don't Want to Change History. She finds him playing a bunch of rock music on a guitar and runs off so that he doesn't see her. He gets her a diamond quill and then says, "Happy birthday," and she is super happy. Later, Julie's trying to convince Michael to sing for the holidays, and he says no, and she says, quote, "So anyone who is that gifted linguistically can likely sing, at least passably. Please, it's a tradition in my family. I didn't know being polylingual also made you a great singer." More you know. He eventually agrees because he can't say no to Julie. Julie mentions listening to Michael sing songs about how he thinks he's such a horrible person, but people praise him for his brain, failing to see what he's done that makes him think that he is such a horrible person. Failing to see what he's done that makes him think he's such a horrible person. I get that he's got a thing with himself and he's just like heard it so many times or heard negative thoughts so many times that he believes it, but like, I don't care. I don't care about Michael. I'm so sick of his self-loathing. Michael is sure that his family is related to Avalon. Christmas is good. Julie gets him some old tablets for Christmas, and he gets her an art room. She thinks, wow, I'm falling in love with him. If only I wasn't married. They bond over painting. He knows her sister is dead and didn't bring it up that his own relative was dead because, quote, it didn't feel right. And he keeps repeating that they will never be in love. They're just going to be friends. That's also freaking, that was in Guns and Smoke, where it was like Jesse was like, I love you. And Bonnie was like, no, you don't. You can't mean it. And Jesse is like, I do mean it. I do mean it. And just Bonnie would not accept. Later, Julie tells him that she knows about the music studio that he has and compliments him and makes him accept the compliment because get over depression. Julie is then having unending nightmares until she joins Michael in his room. No more nightmares. She loves his big bare arms and he loves having her against him. Quote, Michael woke up sometime in the night. She shifted in his arms, and as her firm chest pressed into his side, he knew that if she did attempt something, he would be powerless against it. Eventually, finally, he fell back asleep. It's so stupid. This book could be half as long as it is. It just keeps going on about how he wants her, but he can't have her, and it doesn't matter. Then Julie confronts Michael about celebrating his birthday, and he's too important to not celebrate, so he needs to tell her when his birthday is so they can celebrate. And then they put on some music together and play all night, move then to practicing capoeira fighting. Now they decide to go looking for a vortex in the Bermuda Triangle again. That's another thing. How did they get in? That's another thing. How did they go in while in Florida and end up in Massachusetts? Apparently, other women have been hitting on Michael, and of course, Julie's friends are among them. She is like, I thought that you said being married would stop that. And he's like, for women, but men are expected to have side pieces. So, like, you can't blame me. Of course, everyone who would think poorly of her if she cheated, but the dude gets zero repercussions. Like, if she looks like a supermodel, there is no way that she would not be getting other proposals from other people. Quote, I would never dishonor you like that. You and I aren't actually married, but everyone thinks we are, and many would blame you if I gave in to temptation. She couldn't think straight. His confession had certainly helped settle her thoughts. Then she thought of the last word that he'd said. Temptation. Temptation? Then you are tempted too? She asked, with the jealousy rising. He laughed in exasperation, rubbed his hands over his face. Of course I'm tempted. I'm a 28-year-old virgin, if you haven't forgotten. And how could you possibly? I have never had any single woman show interest in me more before in my life. Now there are dozens offering themselves up on a silver platter, ass out. Any man would be tempted. But I doubt almost any other man would have resisted as I have. I don't know why you're jealous. It's not like we're actually married. You still have Aiden waiting for you. So why would you care? And there it was. The question that she had been trying to avoid this whole time. I love that he's humble bragging here. That's like, well, look, every other man would have fallen for all of the ass pieces flying at them. But not me. I am a good man. But why do you care that I resist for you? Like, you have a husband. I am just nobly resisting for your honor. Shut up, Michael. Julie is stunned, feeling bad because she has this feeling for Michael. She has so many feelings for Michael, and she's holding him back from being with whoever he wants to be with. But she also is married to Aiden. But she also wants to be all over Michael's body. She's doing random, unnamed, nondescribed hypotheses, discovers she and Michael are the anomalies, and she apologizes. He forgives her already. And oh my gosh, this quote. She decided that she would let him experience that with her. She had always intended to remain faithful to Aiden, but she had never thought that she would fall in love with someone else. She always thought Aiden would understand on her account. They would make love once, sometimes twice a day, when they saw each other. Now, to have her Aiden drought proceed with these many months of forced abstinence was torture. She only had sex a couple of times in nearly 2 years. She took a deep breath and headed for Michael's chambers. She's so thirsty. She's so thirsty. She's going to sip from the faucet that is Michael's wee-wee. So she goes into his room and attempts to have cringy sex with Michael. Quote, her gown had slipped off one shoulder. She caught Michael's eyes on hers, so she reached across to slide her slip off completely. She took his hands and slowly traced the curves of her waist and upper chest. She shook at his touch as she felt his hands enjoy her body. She was out of her mind at the thought of that throbbing dick inside of her pussy. Julie drove at Michael, opened his shirt, and ran her hands down his muscular body. His broad shoulders looked so strong, and his stomach appeared chiseled from granite. Her nipples appeared hard again, so she pulled Michael's hands back to her breasts. She could take it. She couldn't take it. She arched her back, rose slightly, and then ran her hand down his enormous cock. Julie reached down his pants, and she felt his hand stop hers. He stops her, saying that she'll regret it if they keep going. He should have stopped this sooner if this was what he was going to do. I hate authors' propensities to stupidly blue ball because they know once the characters get together, they're not going to be able to write anything but the characters having sex because they've crossed that Rubicon, so what's to stop them now? Nothing. That's why they get amnesia or they get separated. And the blue ball is the floaty device for a lot of stories. So once he leaves, Julie is sitting here thinking of Michael as her knight in shining armor, even after everything that just happened, and then they go to sleep together next to each other because that stops her from having bad dreams. The next morning, she can't stop thinking about his amazing compassion as she bathes. Quote, she was extremely attracted to Michael. She thought of the way his hands felt on her body, the way that he let her take control, and his dick. It was amazing. As more thoughts of Michael filled her head, her needs for satisfaction got the better of her, and she traced the curves of her body and touched herself the way that she had wanted Michael to touch her. Meanwhile, Michael is leaving and thinking about everything from last night in his photographic memory and being like, wait, I am no longer friend-zoned because we've been sleeping next to each other. Did that ruin the relationship that we had? Does she think that we are actually in a relationship now because we almost did the do? But don't worry, it'll be lost to history because now he gets to show off without too much of a ripple effect. Then dude is showing Julie's friends a bunch of stars with his super telescope that shouldn't exist, but don't worry, it'll get lost to history because now he gets to show off without too much of a ripple effect on time. Then Julie is having nightmares at night because she's sleeping alone again. Michael picks her up and holds her. She punches him in the face because he startles her by picking her up the way that he does. And then later he flirts with her in front of her friends to put on a show to give her more status with the friends because obviously her husband is into her. My question for this entire scene, because he was just showing off to the chicks, why weren't their husbands there? Why was he just hanging out with a bunch of hens when it could have just been Julie with all of the wives? That makes sense. But like the dude hanging out with all of them, am I just dumb? I mean, I'm an idiot, but also am I a moron as well? In addition to, they work on breaking through time now and also talk about the tablets that Julie got him. Of course, Michael is going to figure out the language on those tablets. He's just got to engineer it a little bit. Time skip, and Julie is thinking about how amazing Michael is, how hard it's been to have sex only twice in 2 years, and how no one's as good and as heartless as Michael. Quote, many times, when I have done things that any normal person would recognize as true interest, he reaffirms that he knows that I would never be interested in him. He has likely built up so much in his mind over that, should I decide to truly pursue a full relationship, it may take some convincing. Julie's then doing errands when Reverend Paris finds her and says the Lord will come for her. He says that Michael can't protect her from the fury, and she tells Michael, and Michael says that everything's going to be Gucci. Don't worry, he's going to take care of her. Though Julie is feeling very apart from herself and her identity right now, and both of her husbands, she doesn't know where her loyalties should actually really lie. It's then that Isaac Newton has summoned them to come to London because he would like to meet them based on their deeds that have actually the rumors have reached London. Also, it was mentioned that Julie looks like the Duchess of something from somewhere, so it looks like the story might be going into the territory that she is her own ancestor. She also paints a portrait of her family that she wants to hang, and this is the first time that we've actually seen her painting being mentioned at all, other than the dude buying her and setting her up a studio to paint in. Is there anything these people can't do? This is just like the most privileged BS ever, where everything just falls into their lap and they're great at everything. Julie goes to bed, has a dream with Aiden. Now, get this. She is now off the hook because Julie goes to bed and has a dream where Aiden is there. And they have sex and they go on a date, and then she gets Aiden's blessing to move on. He's like, look, I don't want you to be unhappy. I know you've got feelings for Michael. Just go and live with Michael. I want you to be happy. She's not even the one that brings it up when she's the one that's cheating on him. In her own dreams, she can't even face her own subconscious, and she makes herself give herself permission in her brain to cheat on her husband. And then she goes, no, that was totally my husband. That was totally legit. Like, Aiden's better off without Julie. But like, what a bad person. Quote, she slowly opened her eyes, and the mellow light of her bedchamber made her realize it had all been a dream. She thought of Aiden, and she could feel the connection slipping away. She felt in that moment that Aiden was moving on, that her dream was him saying goodbye. No, woman, that was you permitting yourself to cheat on him because you want to sleep with Michael so bad. Like, Aiden did not speak to you through time to say go ahead and marry somebody else. So stupid. Anyway, they are going to go and do a hot air balloon and a blimp because now apparently that's what we're doing. It doesn't really matter. In the sky, she kisses Michael and there are literal fireworks behind them. They land. She runs away because she's awkward and kind of bashful. He says that it's okay. And then they go to a ball where Reverend Paris shows up and says that they will all feel the Lord's wrath soon. So that's like 2 or 3 times now that he has come in to threaten and then just like walk off. just set them on fire. Like, just do a Frollo and just fire everywhere. Quote, your loyal subject awaits. She smiled at him, took his hand, and they headed toward the palace. The doors were opened wide for their arrival. They made their way through the bowing crowds to the ballroom. Everyone stopped. The center of the floor was cleared. The orchestra began to play, and they danced a magical dance. The whole thing reminded Michael of a scene from a fairy tale. Then, like a villain of a story, Samuel Paris broke the magic. Ladies and gentlemen! Everyone stopped. Your queen of hell and her heretical Avalonian stooge. He couldn't believe this evil bastard was here. The Lord Almighty shall pass judgment on you presently. You shall feel his wrath soon. A dark cloud descended over the festival. And that's where the scene ends. Then we skip to being out on the sea. So I hope you weren't looking forward to like how that turns out, because no. The story just forces forward that Michael's clearly saying you're horny. The story is just forced forward with Michael saying clearly you're horny and I can't give you the life that you want because we're not sleeping together. So check out London and see if you like anything there so that I can leave you there. It really doesn't make any sense because if he's going to be like, well, you're not with your husband, so I'm going to go find you a different life and then just dump you somewhere. Goodbye. Just tell her you don't want her. Stop pretending that you're like, this feels manipulative to like get rid of her, to make her make a decision to say, no, I want you, to make her say the words or, be homeless and alone with unfamiliar people in an unfamiliar place. At this point in time, I also just felt like Michael was a sadist and does this stuff to Julie to make her say how much she needs him so that he can feel good about himself. He rejects that she could have feelings for him ever and corrects her when she tells him that she has feelings so that she can reassure him again and again and again that she has so many feelings. They get to London, get a room in the castle. Julie seeks out Michael, asking to sleep with him in his bed. He says, of course. And he says he feels like he belongs here in this time period doing this stuff. And she says she doesn't. They're going to go hang out with Isaac Newton, who is not Sir Isaac Newton yet, because this is before he is knighted. And Julie says that she is the highest IQ in the world, which I get it. This is fiction. It's not going by the true of anything. But if you are going to do this and use other historical things, then you might want to look up who the highest IQs are. And not claim to have the highest IQ since 1995, because a dragon got his first degree with a 400 IQ in 1988. That took 2 seconds to Google, by the way. Julie and Michael meet Newton, speak in Latin because that's what cool people do. And don't worry, we don't need the translation of any of that conversation. They just got to show off a little bit. Then they get summoned to talk to the princess. Julie worries that they'll be confused as Duke and Duchess since they have the same faces and the same names. And then they'll have to pay the fees that the Duke and Duchess were supposed to pay the next time they came to London. Doesn't matter. In this section, nothing is happening except Michael is hanging out with Princess Anna and Sarah Churchill is in a hot air balloon flying to meet the King of France, and he is forging his degrees because he's faking his identity. Remember, he talked about wanting to fake an identity, make fake college degrees so that he could teach at the university and have these accolades for things that he didn't actually do because he is actually qualified. He just doesn't have the paperwork to show it. The women are all together talking about having babies, and Sarah Churchill is being like, please don't stop trying to have kids, to Julie as Sarah Churchill eyeballs Michael because he is so freaking hot. Quote, I have 5 children myself. Please tell us that you haven't given up. Sarah Churchill brought the conversation back to her. I certainly have no intentions to stop trying. At that moment, the king's hunting party came riding up the Grand Canal. No woman would stop trying with a man like that. Princess Marianne was admiring Michael as he, Louis, and the rest of the hunting party returned. Michael and the king broke off the mount as the rest of the successful hunting party continued on towards the palace. Just keep sucking your own booty cheek. Everybody gets together for a ball in the blimp and with all of the royalty and wonder where the real Avalon family is right now since they're here and using that name. They land back in London, go to Cambridge, where Michael lectures for a few days and tells Robert Hooke that it's a shame all of the brilliant minds are arguing with each other instead of working together to solve problems. Julie's unsure of why Michael doesn't understand her feelings. They go outside, argue with each other as she thinks that he resents her. He says that he wants her to be happy. Neither believe each other. He yells that he loves her. her. Then Michael runs off immediately, including with his horse. He gets robbed while he's run off, and then he gets hit in the head, but it's okay. He engages in the Capiria fighting skill. So this whole thing really didn't matter. His running away, getting robbed, and doing another fighting thing. He wins easy, goes back. Julie finds him in the garden, asks him what happened. He says that he was thinking of running away, but got attacked, and all he could think about was her, so he came back. He didn't know what love was until he met her. They exchange feelings, kiss for real, and then meet with Newton to talk about waves and skip through needless debate. Now Michael has a new idea of how he's going to initiate time travel. Julie wonders why Michael said he loves her, but is still hesitant even when she returned his love. Julie also believes that Michael is her soulmate. Julie and Michael lay together. Michael is in disbelief as they say they love each other and kiss some more. Julie keeps wanting to have sex, but now that she's available and enthusiastic, Michael keeps saying no. Then a hurricane hits, doesn't matter, nothing happens. Michael takes a nap. Julie finds an inverted vortex, whatever that means. Doesn't really matter, doesn't do anything. The two of them become kung fu masters. Michael picks up his tablets or some artifact from Boston, and everyone is cursing him. Reverend Paris is around, calling Michael's wife a whore, and he's a worker of the devil, and they will pay. So we've heard this from Reverend Paris a couple of times, and Reverend Paris obviously doesn't like to take action very quickly. He just likes to threaten you and look at you meanly in the town square for a while. While they were overseas, it turns out that Reverend Paris started a campaign with the Puritans. Apparently, none of the charity that Michael did actually made him favorable in any way in this town. And now the two of them are getting closer to translating these tablets that were inserted randomly into the storyline. There was no build up to what they mean, what they're supposed to do, or how important they are. They're just kind of injected. They feel like just a tool to get into in case the author got into a pinch so that the author could get themselves out. Michael and Julie get back on the boat, travel with a vortex, no problem, and straight into Delaware River in 1777 and fight off redcoats on their boat. Though it looks like they are immediately returned to Boston. It's kind of really confusingly written the way that it is. But anyway, he and Julie are having, quote, the last Thanksgiving with their friends at the polylingual party in their McMansion, and everyone has a good time, and it ends with a ceremonial sparring between Julie and Michael. They time jump to 1697 and meet Blackbeard. That's literally the only reason for this scene. Then they go to 1718, Port Royal in the Bahamas. Turns out that they can only time jump 20 to 80 years in any direction, so they will likely never get back home via this method. It kind of makes you wonder how they even got here, but I guess you've got the difference between a forced time travel and they're figuring out how to methodically use it, which you'd be like, okay, so you figured out how to do it, now you got to figure out how to extend it, which should happen since you learned how to create a vortex, right? It's just the next step of the evolution of, I don't want to call it technology because it's more like magic. This is where we find out that the time jumping is only drawn to important events or people. So that's why every time they time jump, it's in the middle of some event. They decide that that is enough time jumping for today. The next chapter, they start out in 1697 again. I had no idea what was going on because the skip between scenes and moments was so choppy. Governor William Stoughton summons them to the governor's house, and they are called to be disavowed for their stances in science, as the Puritans don't like it and think these people are evil. I thought it said previously that the witch trials were over, but apparently they've made some special concessions for Michael and Julie. Michael says the previous governor was better than this one, and this one is like super puritanical. What that means, I don't know. We just see some stereotyping, which doesn't feel like the author really put that much effort into building out these characters to be any sort of believable. It's just kind of a cardboard cutout with no shown beliefs, just science equals evil. And there's no idea what they might accept as innovation, because people in the 1600s, not all people were against innovation. And we're not even in Salem anymore. It's just everybody in Boston apparently is now anti-innovation. It also would have been way more interesting for the narrative if this book had seen the town people poking around the McMansion and like finding things in the McMansion that they shouldn't have had. It's not like the McMansion isn't full of freaking things that people from that time period shouldn't see, like freaking light bulbs and power generators. The governor says that everyone thinks they're demons and to watch themselves. Then they're just allowed to leave. You would think that they would maybe, I don't know, be arrested or something. They worry that everyone around them is puritanical and gunning for them now. But like, again, Why weren't they arrested if they're in that much trouble? Michael suspects that Paris has been in the governor's ear and now everyone is lining up against them. Great that this is all happening off the page and we just get told about it after the fact. Just in time to counteract the they do be witches, you get time to go to the orphanage to talk to my best friend, somebody who I didn't think I would be best friends with, but we're really good friends now and I love to give the kids candy. Then when Julie goes there, the matron says that she can no longer be friends with Julie since she's a witch and she gets kicked out due to Paris's influence. Too bad there's no meaning or depth to any of this since the orphanage never played a role in the story and this character Julie/Michael, they never actually showed any relationship with this random woman. Telling us that she cared and had a relationship with the matron doesn't actually make us care. It doesn't show anything. It is just... there's no investment. The author didn't invest. The readers are not going to invest. The crowd turns against Julie. She kicks Paris in the face, and then she is surprised that everyone is still against her when she literally just lashed out at a church official who everybody is already on the side of anyway. Michael figures that they'll have to do a time jump to get closer to get back to the modern day, but it could take 150 years to get there. And that's fine since they aren't aging, so it's not really going to be that much of a problem. We're again asking why they're trying to get back to the modern era because earlier in London, Michael said that he felt like he belonged. Julie says that she belongs anywhere Michael is, so she doesn't even need to get back to get to her family or to get to Aiden because she's dumped them all and Michael is her entire life now. So what is the point? The story does not carry a motivation for either of these characters, and Michael clearly doesn't care about his family, and he does have a family. Remember how this book started out with Michael going to his family's house for holidays? And his mom dropped him off at the airport and said that she cared about him and she didn't want him obsessing over this past background of the treasure of Avalon. But instead, Michael almost let himself die and then said that he had no reason to live and nobody cared about him. So he doesn't acknowledge that he has a loving family that does like to see him, including his nieces and nephews whom he spent the holidays with. With all of his skills, he could be building stuff constantly to make his family money, but he doesn't. While we're thinking about going to the modern era again, Julie says that Michael is her present, so wherever he is, she is going to be happy. Michael then is confronted about his professor role because he's a demon worshiper. Of course, he bests the Inquisitors who ask him a bunch of questions, so they have to leave him be. But he is worried that he and Julie will be next. Then, randomly, a mob comes up to Michael while he's writing Darkness somewhere. That mob shoots Darkness, the horse, and it dies. He just shoots at their feet to get them to run off or to be scared. And in the end, you get this emotional moment. Quote, "Why? Why did you do this?" Darkness slowly stopped moving. His breathing, once mighty, was shallow. His breathing, once mighty, was shallow and miserly. In the end, Darkness nudged his friend in a final sign of loyalty. Michael hugged Darkness one last time. Julie and Michael mourn together and make a statue where the horse died. Quote, "For the next couple of days, he decided to focus all on the good times with Darkness. Julie and Michael shared their favorite stories of their giant friend late into the night. A true light was Darkness." Out of nowhere, Michael is finally thinking of proposing after 10 months of being alongside Julie, and since he said, "I love you," this is 5 years after the two of them have been plopped down here, and them living together in the past. I wish we got to see any of their relationship building. The 5 years that they spent in the past feels, like a couple of separate books of separate things happening, not all of it happening within 400 or something pages, 450, 430 pages. He dresses up, makes her a fancy dinner, and then proposes. Obviously, she says yes, though Julie's immediately worried that Michael has a better first time. Though Julie is immediately worried that Michael has a better first time in sex than hers was with Aiden. Again, you don't have to throw him under the bus, okay? You already cucked him. You've already cheated on him and left him and then made it his fault. You don't need to keep insulting him. Just leave him alone once you've said go away. Quote, Michael surprised me with a proposal this evening during our balloon dinner. Thinking about it now, I should have suspected it. He did a great job of keeping me guessing. So finally, the boy becomes a man. I've dreamt of this outcome ever since London. Most of the plans for our wedding are already set. In 11 days, the longest drought of my life will finally come to an end. I have fantasized about it so many times. Is it possible for reality to measure up? It will be his first time. In a way, it feels like the first time for me. It's been 6 years, and the anticipation is making me nervous. I hope he studied, because my first time was a debacle. Yeesh. I can only hope that Michael has a better first time than I did, but I will be a patient teacher. Julie is grabbing Michael's butt, ready to get it down and dirty. She is so freaking thirsty already. As she's squeak-a-deekling his cheeky cheeks, she goes, "One more day until your booty grab is mine. Tee-hee-hee-hee-hee-hee-hee." Then the sheriff knocks on the door and arrests Michael for heresy. Fortunately, despite Paris standing in the door saying your time to hang is coming, witch, they don't arrest her. They just leave her there. You'd think that since they failed to kill her 5 years ago, Paris would take any chance he could get to freaking hang her. But he doesn't, though she knows like 4 or 5 self-defense methods, so at least if Paris attacked her, she could probably fight him off this time. Also, fortunately, these people are so stupid that despite them believing Michael is a demon worshiper and Julie is a witch, they let her visit her husband in jail so that they can talk. You don't think, and there's not even a guard in there. You'd think that they wouldn't let that happen because what? You don't think that they're going to think of an escape plan maybe, or like do witchy magic or something. After they visit with each other and hug, Julie, also being an idiot, heavily sighs in the South Cascade, not around anyone, not even with her horse, and not behind any locked doors when she knows everybody is freaking out to get her right now. And then she is grabbed by a bunch of villagers who hang her immediately. But then they also go, wait, we have to wait for him to be here. You guys are so unorganized. What did you come here for? Did you come to hang her or did you not come to hang her? So then, like, why did you come hang her up and then go, wait a second, we need to wait. Reverend Paris shows up just in time to stop the mob from raping Julie after ripping her corset off. But instead of hanging her, he's like, nah, fam, just leave her here to die. I don't understand what happened to Paris, who wanted to see her dead, who kept saying her hanging time was coming. And I say I don't understand, but I do understand, because the author painted themselves into a corner that they couldn't figure out how to get out of. So instead, what they had to do was break the continuity of the character to make the character do things that are out of character, that don't make sense for the character, because otherwise Julie would die. Granted, with all of the rule sets that this author has put into place, I don't think Julie would actually die, because the author could just throw in another angel visitor. It could be freaking an angel visitor from Michael's side of the family that just cut her down. And you're going to see a freaking angel come and save Julie anyway, because, yeah, the author wrote themselves into a corner. It's just so dumb. It's so dumb. And you know, when you constantly change the rules of your own story, when you show that there are no consequences, when you show as the author that you will reach your hand into the story and like mess everything around, when you show that there are no consequences to any action, no logic to any action, like if character does thing, then you'll see the outcome of that thing later. If you prove that there is no cause and effect in your story, then you give the reader very little reason to continue reading, because nothing matters. There are no consequences. There are no stories to follow. There is nothing. It can just go in any direction. And so like what happened 150 pages ago or 200 pages ago, or Julie's opening with her dead sister, none of it matters because it doesn't come into the story. It's just kind of conveniently inserted and then forgotten about when it's no longer needed. And I'm sorry, but inserting random trauma into your character does not automatically make them sympathetic. It doesn't make me care. It doesn't make me like them. Julie having this background doesn't make me like her. It's stupid to insert it in the very beginning, and it's cheap. It's just bad writing. People can feel for your character, but you cannot use trauma. I mean, you can try to use trauma, but it is harder, and it does not. But it's cheap, and it can irritate your readers to try to cheaply use trauma to make readers care about your character. So instead of killing her like they keep saying that they are going to do, they just hang her up, tie one end of the rope to a rock while she's hanging over a tree, and then have a log underneath her feet because they did that after they stopped from hanging her a second ago. That is where they leave Julie to die hanging. The jury is then stacked with Puritans, and the case against Michael is led by Reverend Parris, but Michael just focuses on telling everyone how he is humble and giving and smart, and that's all there is. He just explains science to the Puritans, and they're like, oh. Meanwhile, Julie wakes up from her hanging position and theoretically just starts swinging around by her neck to try and move the 600 to 1,000 pound rock that is holding the rope down, because she figures it's easier to move the rock than to try to get somewhere else. But like, she really is just swinging and helicoptering all around by the rope on her neck, her arms tied behind her back, and she's just trying to move this rock. But reality doesn't matter, you know, because an angel appears and helps her break free in the end anyway. So again, nothing matters. Michael says that he'd kill Parris if it wouldn't alter the timeline. This is just an excuse. He's clearly altered the timeline multiple times by now. The trial continues. Julie gets to Boston and everyone is just staring at her like she's a ghost instead of freaking just shooting her, because this is like the second or third time that she's come back from the dead. Kill the witch. Trial goes to recess when Julie walks in and everything turns to turmoil. Why not just arrest her again, kill her on the spot, in the middle of the freaking room, make it fire this time? Like, do something. The witch is not dying. Michael gives a speech that curiosity of God's creation isn't heretical, or else they're all heretics. They get voted to be hanged the next day. Julie is hysterical, calling this all bullshit. There's an immediate recount, and it's a unanimous, nay, never mind, they're going to be fine, making the first count stupid and redundant, since it gets overturned immediately with zero drama. Then an angry mob attacks. Julie is turned into a boomerang, attacking the mob and being thrown around by Michael as he just wields her as a weapon, and then they basically ping pong. It basically becomes a Sonic arcade between these two, just defeating everybody in the courtroom. Obviously, they escape and everything is fine. Then they go to leave Boston now, using the Liberty, which is the name of their boat, and giving Rose and her husband the Boston mansion. Rose was the woman that Julie picked to manage all of the tasks at the mansion. Then you get cringe. Quote, "Then bide," she kissed him, "fair prince, lips so divine." Cecily let out an audible sigh. Michael couldn't help but let out a little giggle, then composed himself and continued. "Thy lip," he kissed her, "do taste of such sweet sorrow. Alas, but I shall bide until tomorrow." He kissed her again. "'Tis a sonnet to my heart," Cecily said, and the crowd of ladies giggled and swooned. Julie smiled. Michael mirrored her. "I love thee," she kissed him. "And I thee," he kissed her one last time. At the wedding, Newton is the one that walks Julie down the aisle and then gives her away. I don't understand why or how or where he came from. They wed, they go to have sex, there's more cringe, whatever, and the sex is obviously great. Quote, "At 32 years old, I finally feel like a complete man. It sounds pathetic, I know. No, there's no one else who deserves to live fully more than you." She stroked his cheek. "Was I any good? Do you even have to ask? Let's just say I'm glad that you studied." I bet he read the Kama Sutra, let's be real. She laughed. "You were perfection, as were you. And I hope that you are ready for more." He raised his brows. He dove into her being without hesitation. She welcomed him with open arms for several more intense rounds deep into the night. "How do you have so much stamina?" "I did some research on the topic." Apparently, in order to know how to do something, you just have to read it, and then it's just automatically internalized into your being. "Of course you did," she said, with a smile. "How much more do you have left? Is that a challenge?" "Show me," she said, as he took her into his arms. They made up for lost time over the next 2 days. He certainly put her to the test. They left for their honeymoon on the Liberty the next day. She'd be like, "He certainly put her to the test. Good thing she had 3 PhDs. You know, if it leaned more into being absolutely ridiculous, because it is already ridiculous, but if it just did not take itself seriously, and it did in places take itself way too seriously, which includes the previous sex scene when it was dropping all the pussy cock words earlier, this could have gone in a completely different direction. But I feel like it took itself too seriously while also not. Anyway, they're pretty much agreeing to go home and figuring out how to get home from here. Julie says that she knows in her heart that Aiden has moved on, so she doesn't have to feel bad. Plot twist when we freaking get to the second book and Aiden is still pining after her and she's like, oh my gosh, what have I done? Now she feels like she is worth, but, or, you know, she just wanted to be permissed to cheat on Michael and she gave herself the permission and says, but it was Aiden's idea. Why does Aiden even exist? He's not important. Maybe it'll be answered in a future book. The world may never know. But Julie now feels like she is worthy of Michael, and suddenly Michael sees Lord Cavendish, which is somebody who showed up only during like the 4th day of the trials in these last couple of chapters. Where it's obviously not even an important character. So he just shows up and he also gets sucked into the vortex. So we've got no character building with freaking random Lord Cavendish. And the epilogue is them in Atlantis. And so that's where that's going to open up. The Lost Empire the next time. So that is the story. And no, the prologue never did become relevant, did it? Neither did Caitlin. Caitlin was so unnecessary as a waitress. And that's such a random place for that, too. Anyway, final comments that don't fit in with the whole rest of the story. There was no motivation, period, for any of the characters. And motivation is what drives any story. Whether it is, this character is bored, this character is depressed, this character is trying to get to the mountain to cast the ring in, this character is trying to survive, this character is trying to get out of the grocery store before freaking rush hour. There's always some kind of motivation in any given story, in any good story. And it could be something super simple, but it is what drives you from one place to another. If your story does not have a character that wants for something, then there is no motivation. This story didn't even have the motivation for the characters to survive because they were indestructible. You didn't have Julie trying to escape the dungeon. You didn't have Julie trying to reason with some of the Puritans when she was being captured as a witch. You just had her being treated as a witch and then she was taking it. You didn't have Michael trying to survive or else he was going to die. You didn't have him acting out of desperation. He was acting like he was just on a freaking adventure on a field trip and he was going to go home someday soon and nothing was going to be wrong. So there's just no motivation, no drive, no risk, so no stakes, no nothing. All of the emotion throughout was shallow in a fairly typical fashion for the type of fiction this feels like. The introduction of trauma or of dead loved ones felt really cheap, felt really shallow, and then the ending of this book, or the last 1/3 where he's just meeting a bunch of rich people and a bunch of notable figures, just feels like a children's show that is quickly running together all of the last people that it wanted to introduce the audience to before the series ends because they've run out of funding. The rushing through self-pitying wonderkind was not compelling. So the entire beginning with Michael was just saying how he was so gifted, but also so self-hating, and it never built beyond that. And I get self-hating characters. I've got self-hating characters. Joey is very specifically traumatized and self-hating, but you didn't get to see it interact. And instead, it mostly, whenever he was being self-hating, it was either to himself only or it was to manipulate Julie. And that's what it always felt like. It was manipulation. The 3 PhDs for Julie was useless because you never saw her do anything smart. It was entirely useless to try to make her as smart as she was. And I didn't even understand that choice since it never came into the story. For the longest time, because they spent so much time in freaking Salem with Michael doing Minecraft and Julie being tried, it made me go, what does this have to do with Avalon or the treasure of Avalon or King Arthur? Like, it's just another element thrown into the story that maybe was supposed to tie into something. Maybe will tie into something in the future, but it wasn't actually built into the story. And then they didn't get distracted from it because they were trying to survive. It just kind of disappeared just as quickly as it appeared. In my opinion, if you're going to make characters insanely smart or insanely good at something that it's notable, then it should probably be important to the story in some way. It doesn't have to be this big deal thing. Like Ralph over here is really good at playing music, and Casey learned how to play music, and he's a great frontman. And then you see his charisma, and they matter in the story. But the story isn't their story isn't about them being musicians. You do see their disposition though. You do see their background and the way they behave. So if you're going to make your characters this insanely smart, then you need to think about what positives that bring, what negatives that brings, what kind of experiences do they have, and instead it just felt like piling everything onto freaking Michael and then saying that the woman was smart because I don't even know. If you have any theories as to why Julie had three if you have any theories as to why Julie had 3 PhDs, let me know, because I don't see any reason for it narrative wise. She didn't act any differently than if she had 0 PhDs. She didn't do anything with science. I was personally unable to believe or accept the circumstances of how the time travel even happened. I don't need a big reasoning or logic behind how they time traveled because, like, I watched Stephen King's 11/22/63, where James Franco is introduced to a closet that just takes you back to that one date. It's always that one date. That's all that it is. It's a wormhole that goes into that one date. And I can accept that because the story is not a story about the wormhole. It's a story about what to do with the wormhole. But you do have to establish something to let me just follow along, and this didn't ever do it with the time travel. At least get them to the Bermuda Triangle and then be like, when you hit this part in the Bermuda Triangle, then they disappear and they time travel. Like, that would have been enough. But them leaving from in their hotels didn't make any sense. Then they wouldn't have even had to meet on the plane. They could have both been on the same boat that was going out to the triangle. But then, the only reason she was going out to the Bermuda Triangle was because he mentioned it. So I don't know. But she does a TV show. She could have been sent out for something. Like, make it make sense. Now, as I was going through this and we were seeing Michael constantly complain about how he has bad luck and he can't do anything no matter how hard he tries, I couldn't help myself from thinking that some authors just don't understand what giving your characters a difficulty or a weakness actually looks like. Tripping in the woods or having trouble finding gold for like 2 pages doesn't actually count as difficulty for your character when you later find the answer within basically the same chapter or even the same page. It reminded me a lot of in Alexa Dunn's book, Pretty Dead Queens, when the main character wanted to get onto this computer to find information and the computer was locked. And she was like, dang, I entered the wrong password. And then in the next sentence, she knew the correct password. So it was like, you didn't struggle. That doesn't count as a struggle. You didn't have to do anything for the password. You already knew it. I don't know why we had that sentence. The 2 sentences don't matter. Usually if there's a struggle, it means that you have to make a decision to get out of that situation. And then there may or may not be consequences that are expected or unexpected. Like if you run away from the cops, the consequences are that the next time you see the cops, it's not going to be as great. Which in Bodymore's case, you see Joey run away from the cops and it bites her in the butt later when she runs into the cops again and they see her. That's what makes stories interesting, is at least for me, is you see characters make decisions, you see them take action based on those decisions, and then you see the fallout of those decisions. Were they successful? Were they not successful? How are they going to deal with the problems that cropped up that they couldn't tell were going to happen, especially if they are nearsighted when it comes to the future and not farsighted when it comes to the future. Joey is definitely a nearsighted kind of person. When I started reading this, I was trying to figure out what genre it was going to be because the prologue confused me, and then the first chapter confused me, and then the second chapter confused me. And so I went to Amazon, and the tags on Amazon say play or theater and stage play. None of those are accurate to this. So I don't know why it says stage play or theater, but it makes this look dishonest because there are people that try to use less popular tags, genre tags on Amazon in order to maximize their role. Like if they get bestseller on something by selling minimal copies in a genre where there's little competition. So you only have to sell like maybe 10 in a non-crowded genre to get a bestseller tag on your book. And so that's what this looks like. I'm not saying that's what it did, but I'm saying the genre categories that show on Amazon do not match what this book is, and it looks sussy. I don't know why Julie wasn't allowed to be single and socially awkward due to her genius and her inability to maybe be around others. Like if you think about somebody who is so smart that they are above their peers, and so then they'll be treated like they're older, but they are actually still emotionally and developmentally, a child. That's going to make it weird for you and your peers. That's actually going to affect your relationship with your peers. And when you're so specialized, that also often affects other parts of your brain or your socialization because other kids don't want to talk to you because you're like this, but you also don't fit in with adults because you're too immature to fit with the adults. And then you as the super smart person also look at the adults like they're dumb. So it would have made more sense if she wasn't super popular, if she wasn't super successful in an outgoing field, and then she wouldn't have had the issue of Aiden. The entire thing with Aiden just made her a completely dislikable character. I freaking hate her. She still feels like she cheated. Because she is the one that justified herself to go and do that. And there's no point to it. There was no point to her or Jessica. Again, you could have just started with Michael and then had Michael run into her, either going back in time or when they first meet, and had none of the baggage of Jessica's background. And it would have made the story better. Briefly, I want to talk about the reliability or believability of the author. Now, when you're writing fiction, you don't have to tell the truth, obviously. You could take historical events and you can change them because you're writing fiction and not history, so you can write alternate history. Not everything in a book has to be true, obviously. And you can also have a narrator who lies about characters or doesn't know what's going on or misrepresents the truth on purpose or on accident. It doesn't all have to be true. However, there are things that you do have to do to earn the reader's trust to go along with the things that you are doing. And when you constantly change things all the time, or you undermine the information that you straight up tell the reader, you make yourself, as the narrator or the author, untrustworthy. I sort of talked about this earlier, not that long ago. And it's that trust that you build with the cover, with the description, with the genres, with the style of the story that gets the reader to go along and say, okay, show me what you want me to, what you want to show me. I know for me, and you can let me know if it's any different with you as a reader, as a different reader. But for me, as soon as the author I usually have a harder time writing critiques for books that I enjoy, because as soon as the author just hooks me, I'm just in for the ride. So I have to consciously like stop myself. However, if the author doesn't get me to trust them and to just go along for the ride, I am constantly stopping the story to go, is that true though? Are you lying to me? That's not what you said 2 pages ago. And so I'm constantly finding stuff like that. So author believability and reliability are very important to writing a fulfilling story that pulls the reader in. At least that's my opinion on it. And obviously, my opinion is not the only opinion. It's just the opinion of whether I will enjoy a story or not. And with this, you can guess. With that said, what are your thoughts on the story, on the characters, on the setup, on the structure? Have you read Avalon TimeFall? Will you read Avalon TimeFall? How do you feel about time travel stories? Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments below. With that said, have a great day and don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out?
The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross.
Is he in trouble?
We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him.
Cross isn't a killer. For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die. Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Why? Did you do that? To the left, plain black letters read along the wall. You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry. Flickers black and black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?